In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. Seeing none, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Mrs. Werner?
Here.
Mr. Venuto?
Here.
Mr. Ledwin?
Here.
Mrs. Notch?
Here.
Ms. Sheehan? Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Zexer?
Here.
Mr. Cataldo?
Here.
Mr. Bodnar?
Here.
Thank you.
We need a motion for the minutes of January 25th.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Zetter, seconded by Mrs. Notch.
Okay. Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo? Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we need a motion for the minutes for February 22nd.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Venuto,
Second.
Okay.
seconded by Mr. Ledwin.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo? Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we have a resolution for 604 Reading Avenue. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mrs. Notch,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo? Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have a resolution for Thomas and Gigi Lord, 1239 New York Avenue.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Venuto,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Zetzner.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo? Mrs. Werner, Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our first application is Dev Jacobson, 918 Columbia Avenue. Please turn on your microphones. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. On behalf of Mr. Jagadish and Charles Sandman, we are here today to gain approval for a second-floor porch and railing, which is going to be part of an existing second-floor apartment over top of his garage on a property that has a principal structure. This is a second residential unit, which pre-existed the zoning ordinance, but as such, it is an existing non-conforming use. For that reason, we come before the board because it is considered an exacerbation of that use. As the board may recall, we've been before the board back in December when we first presented this application. Prior to that application, I had inquired with the HPC, who indicated to me it was a non-contributing structure, so we decided to come to the board first. But through the course of that meeting, the board thought that it would be a good idea to get the input of the HPC with regard to what we were proposing here. We have since done that. In the process of doing so, as the board may recall, my client presented, and in the original paperwork you'll see, he presented some railings that were what he believed to be a Victorian-style railing. Since that meeting, my client, and before the HPC meeting, my client went around and took a look at all the surrounding properties and came to the conclusion that it really wouldn't fit in because it was not consistent with what was in the surrounding neighborhood. So what he did was he made a proposal to the HPC, and that's what is attached to the HPC resolution, which is what was before them there, which is different than what we had last time we were before you. And the reason why he did that is he drove around town and he looked at everything, and he wanted to present something to the board consistent with everything that was in the area, and that's what we put there. The board ultimately agreed with that proposal and gave conceptual approval to the plan. One of the things that they made a point to point out was when you get something that's a very fancy railing, usually they come in prefabricated sections where you just put a section up in between the posts. They clearly didn't like that. And they liked this proposal because it was, as they would refer to, as stick-built, even though they did indicate that it's okay that it be made of a material like AZIC, which certainly holds up to the weather much better. But they were pretty clear they didn't want these prefabricated sections in there, and that's what their approval was based upon. So I don't know that we need to go all the way into total depth and recover ground that we already covered the last time we were here, but we certainly will do whatever the board would like us to do. But that's basically the only change that we did since we were here last and got the HPC approval, so that this board would feel more comfortable with what we were proposing. Having said that, I'd like to swear on my client, and I've also brought our engineer, Mr. Rami Nasser, to make any comments about the proposal that need be made.
I'll swear in your client and your engineer, and also the board's engineer. Please raise your right hand. Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Okay, Mr. Jagdish, you are the owner of this property?
Yes.
Okay, and as you indicated before, we've got two residents on the property, the principal residence. Do you reside in that residence?
I reside in the garage apartment.
Okay, what about the main house?
The main house is for rent.
Okay, and has been for rent for some years?
Correct.
Okay.
Since 2003.
The garage apartment, this is where we're proposing to build this deck and the rails that we presented to the board?
Yes.
Okay, and you reside in that unit?
Yes.
Is that all, do you solely reside in that unit, you and your family?
Yes.
Do you rent it?
No.
Okay, it's solely for your own personal use?
Correct.
Okay, and the,
Sorry about that.
okay. So if you could just briefly explain to the board what it is that you want to do here.
Certainly. And so I've been asked, even my wife and my friends and sound like, why do you want this deck? And I'll be honest with you, the real reason is this. Like, Cape May is a beautiful town. I love being here. I love coming here in the summertime. But the beauty of a deck is when people are walking by, you say hello. It's neighborly. It enhances my property in a way that I get to say good evening and get, good morning. And that's what makes Cape May. When you're walking down the street and people are sitting on their porch and you look up and somebody says hello, that's the connections you make. Like, our town is beautiful, right? Our town is beautiful for the buildings. However, the real beauty is the people we attract. And when you're sitting in this house, at my house, sitting out in the driveway is not so nice. But sitting out and watching people walk by and being able to just say hello, and sometimes hello turns into something more. I have great neighbors. I get along with them. But it's the people walking down the street, down Columbia, where I live. It's nice. When I'm out doing yard work and you say hello, sometimes that turns into, or somebody's walking their dog. That's what makes Cape May. I don't have that in this property. Everyone on my street does. And when he talked about the railings, what I did notice was all our railings are stick on my block. You go up 2 blocks, they're more Victorian. That's why originally I proposed Victorian. And when I looked at my immediate neighbors, they're stick. That's when we went to HPC. But the real reason is that it's people, it's the ability to sit out and say hello And hello can turn into more. Hello can turn into going out for a drink. Hello can turn into dinner. And that's why my wife and I want it. That's why, quite honestly, spending more on professional services than the cost of the improvement. So that's the real reason. And I believe, quite honestly, in particular in my property, it is certainly going to enhance the frontage and the street view of it. And, you know, I'm coming on my 30 years of federal service. In 2 years, I plan on retiring here. I plan on being here. And this is where we'll stay because I have a large house in Baltimore. I love this house because it's small, it's less to maintain, and it's a perfect place to retire. That's why I'd like my
And you
porch.
plan on making your permanent residence?
Absolutely. That's certainly because, you know, but now I put that with caveat, wherever my children might have grandchildren, I might change our plans, but right now, this is where grandchildren could change.
I mean, wherever your wife tells you to go.
That too, but we've agreed on Cape May. This is our house. We've had it since 2003. We're now getting to the end of our, you know, our mortgage is done, so this is where we want to end up staying. But the real reason I want it there in that location is we have a wonderful street. It attracts people, renters as well as owners, and it's a great place. And you've all approved multiple new homes down, 3 houses down, 4 houses down, to the right and left. Ours are the only 2, 3, and houses there that are,
So
you know, on the
all
older
your
side.
neighbors are aware of what you're.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know if you were allowed, I mean, look, Eleanor Carr lives next door. John Carr came in for many years. We've got, she would come, but obviously older, not coming. And
But we're not asking you to testify on their behalf, that would be.
I'm simply saying,
None of your neighbors have expressed displeasure with what you're planning to have.
correct,
Good
correct.
enough. Okay, next witness will be Mr. Nasser. You can come over here, Dev. Mr. Nasser, we've been through this on a previous occasion, but briefly, could you rehash what we did and so the board is straight on everything that's going on? There was no modification to the plan since our original. Please speak into the microphone. Since, most particularly, modifications that have been made to the plan since they were originally proposed.
Sure. This is our revised plans that we submitted to the board. It shows the deck that has been adjusted to eliminate the need for the side yard setback and the rear yard setback. So the only variance we are requesting at this point is the exacerbation of the non-conforming use as a D2 variance at this point.
It's under the D2 category as opposed to D1.
Yes, sir, because the way I see it is, this is a pre-existing, lawfully existing use. Probably it was before even the zoning ordinances came in effect. They never requested a D variance to create this existing nonconformance. So I believe the D2 variance would apply in this situation.
Okay, and as a result of certain special circumstances, approved-
Can I ask a question? Did you submit revised plans?
these plans have been submitted.
I don't think we received those. Are these, I thought maybe you handed them out when I
I
was.
certainly can, because I have a lot of copies.
Hold on, let me just try to fix this. So the revision, first of all, you got to give them out because technically they're supposed to be within 10 days ahead of the meeting.
It's a
But it-
minor revision
what
which
you've
was
done
intended
is-
to cure the side setback.
If the revision you're talking about is the one that eliminated variances, then I don't have an issue with that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So basically, we're going to treat it as if there was some concern at the meeting about the variances, and you've modified it to get rid of those concerns. So you-
Yes, sir.
The plan you're handing out now removes 2 of the 3 variances. Normally, we wouldn't let you just do new plans at the meeting, but you're removing variances, so that seems less offensive to the statute.
I don't want to point fingers, but. What you fixed, I did I didn't do that. Yeah. Maybe that's the reason you have all these copies?
It could be.
What was the date of the revision? I'm going to know in a second. Hold on. Never mind. Thank you.
What was that date? Can we say that out
To
loud?
2024.
Okay. Can we mark that as Exhibit A? Mark 2/21/24?
Can you leave that with me too? Do you mind? Okay, great, thank you.
Do you want one?
I'll take that one. That one's fine. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
There's no big change. If they eliminate the variance, it's fine.
Okay.
And just so that there's no question in the record, I'm allowing these plans to come in even though they weren't in advance, 10 days in advance, because if we were just working with the plans that they already had, and if what they said was, I want to modify my application to eliminate 2 variances, we would let them do that on the fly without plans. We do that a lot. Someone says, I'm going to move this deck back 5 feet so that it conforms. Well, we don't make them do new plans at the hearing. We say, okay, move it back, and then we put that in the thing. So I'm treating it like that. So I think it's okay.
All right, thank you.
All right?
Okay, can you explain that to the board?
Yes, so basically what the shaded area is, we shortened the deck, so we are outside the side yard setback, and we shortened the deck from the rear, so we're outside the rear yard setback. So we're not exacerbating any of these existing conditions.
So we're seeking no bulk variances?
No. The structure as it stands, it complies with almost all the bulk standard except the garage.
Can you carry the microphone? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Except the existing garage has 12-foot rear yard setback, supposed to be 25 feet. That's the only existing nonconformance with the structure. So the proposed deck would not exacerbate any of these nonconformances except the use.
Okay. Now, I'd like to address the D2 variance standard, which calls for some certain criteria to be met in order to justify the board granting such a variance. Can you go over that, please?
Yes, I mean, we look at the positive and negative criteria, or with the special reasons. One of the special reasons for the D2 variance is if you enhance the aesthetic of the structure, which is definitely we are enhancing the structure, the aesthetic of the structure. We're becoming more in compliance with the neighborhood that's around us. So that's how we address the special reasons. When we look at the negative criterias, we're not changing the actual use of the structure. It's exactly the same use. We're not increasing the habitable space, only a space that they can recreate. They can recreate at the bottom floor or the top floor. It's the same type of recreation, so we're not really impacting any of the existing uses. And we feel that there's no negative impact with the granting this
In
variance.
your opinion, does the proposed deck and rail enhance the aesthetic or the appearance of the property from the street?
Yes, takes a structure that's just like a straight wall and makes it more interesting. Especially I believe the historic commission approved it. If I'm not mistaken.
And would that appearance be consistent with the surrounding properties?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Do you if you said this, and I missed it, I'm sorry. Do you believe that has any negative impact on the zone plan, zoning ordinance of the surrounding neighborhood?
No, sir. There's no negative criteria, so there's no impact or detriment to the zone plan or the zoning ordinances.
There was concern about getting the cars with the posts in the previous meeting.
Right.
Has that been changed?
Yes. And we showed, based on our plan, we showed the 5 parking spaces on site. And if this becomes an issue, there's room, we can move to the front. So there's room in the driveway to show that the cars can fit 5 cars on the structure.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. At this time, we'll open to the public within 200 feet of the property. Beyond 200 feet of the property? Closed to the public?
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to go over my September 1st, 2023 review memorandum. This memorandum is based off the original plan that was submitted and does not reflect the revisions that were submitted tonight with Exhibit A, but I'll update that for Mr. King's provision of the resolution of approval or. Okay, so just briefly, I've gone through this memo before. There were 3 waivers that were requested, and I did support that based on the nature of this application, and so those should be granted by the board. This is a project located in the R3A district, so apartments over garages are not permitted, and you're not allowed to have 2 uses on the same site. So that's the standard that has to be met. It's an existing non-conforming situation because we have essentially a single-family dwelling attached by a breezeway to a apartment over an existing garage. So it's an existing nonconformity, and they're expanding it. So the use already exists, they're expanding that use, so therefore, there's a D2 use variance that's been requested. So the board has to rely on the applicant's testimony with regards to that. I'd like to update the zoning table on page 3 of 5 based on Exhibit A that was submitted. The rear yard setback requirement of 25 feet is now being met. So the proposed deck has a rear yard setback of 27.9 feet. So where 19.4 feet is shown, that should be replaced with a 27.9, and therefore that setback is now conforming. The side yard setback,
Ray, can I ask you a question about that real quick?
yep,
The rear yard, where it says that the existing is 12 feet, should that say conforming or existing non-conforming?
it should be an ENC,
Yeah, okay, thanks.
sorry.
That's right.
Okay, side yard setback. That requirement is 8 feet. What they originally proposed was 6.24 feet. That is being revised to 8 feet so that it conforms. So both rear and side yard setbacks have been eliminated. There was an opportunity to conform, and the applicant has done that. So the only variance that's necessary is that D variance for the expansion of a non-conforming use.
Greg, can I ask a question on that one, too?
Yep.
On the top part, should that be 8 and 14.9 or 11 and 8? Like, what do I do with that top part?
That would be,
I think it's 11 and 8, but I just want
the 11 gets replaced with an 8.
the 11 becomes an 8, okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's a review of the variances. The general review comments, we asked them to update the variance plan to show the parking spaces. I do believe that's done, but I haven't had an opportunity to review that, so that'll remain a condition. We've asked for the setbacks to be provided on the plans. That's probably shown on Exhibit A, but we're going to leave that as a condition. We've asked them under item number 3 that they grade the property towards the front of the lot and not abutting properties, and if there's any stormwater issues created, they're required to submit a grading and drainage plan, and they also must comply with Chapter 525, which is the minimum stormwater management and grading requirements. Item number 5 is our standard condition that they have to replace the sidewalk adjacent to the subject site to the satisfaction of the board engineer. 6 is our standard condition that they have to post the inspection escrow and tie the certificate of occupancy to compliance with the plans that the board approves. Item number 7 is the applicant is required to comply with the Shade Tree Commission, the Fire Department, and Public Works Department requirements or recommendations. They recommended approval in all cases with no comments, so that should not be an issue. Item number 8 is our standard condition that they have to comply with any and all state, county, and local approvals. Item 9 is compliance with the HPC approval. They have submitted evidence of conceptual approval, but we will need evidence of final approval. Finally, or not finally, but they have to, under item number 10, they have to comply with the applicable affordable housing requirements. Item number 11 is, should the board grant approval, they're required to revise the plans to address all conditions of approval and submit the requisite number of compliance plans to the board for approval. And that is a summary of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Unless there's further comment, the motion, well, let me just, this is they've eliminated most of the variances except for expansion of a non-conforming use. The reason this is a non-conforming use, interestingly, is because the two are connected? Is that what? There's something that says they are connected, it's not that they're not connected. Really clear, then, Craig, you can talk about that for a
So
second.
if it was just a garage and it was connected by the breezeway, it would comply. The fact that there's an apartment over that garage and that there's an existing single-family detached dwelling that's attached to it creates the two uses.
So there are two uses on a single lot, which is not permitted. They're expanding the use because they're creating an outdoor space for that structure. Normally, it's an expansion of the habitable space, but since this is a deck, it is, putting on the exterior and interior use, so it is an expansion of a non-conforming use, but it's an existing non-conforming use, so it's not like a variance where they're trying to put a use that's not a new use on the lot. It's a use that's kind of been there for a while, so it gets a little credit. And there's a case that talks about normally aesthetics wouldn't be enough to permit an expansion of a use variance. But since it's a mere expansion, sometimes even aesthetics can be the reason. So you're safe if you believe that aesthetically this improves the property, that is within your discretion to grant the expansion. It's a little technical, but that's the gist. So the motion I recommend being made, although your decision is up to you, but make it in the affirmative, but how you vote is up to you, is a motion to grant the use variance under section 525-16.1A and 525-9, subject to the conditions outlined by the board engineer 1 through 11.
Just a reminder, there's 5 affirmative votes that need to pass this because it is a D variance.
How many voters do we have? Full 7. Oh, and we should mention on the record that Mr. Cataldo, who's a new member on the board tonight, did listen to the prior hearing and signed an appropriate certification that I'll mark as Exhibit B so that he's able to vote as well. So you have a full 7 voters. And thank you for doing that, because not all board members take the time to go do that, so we could vote on your application. So that was, everybody appreciates that. Okay. So,
Okay, so can we have that motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Zetzer.
I'll second.
Sorry.
Mr. Lewin? That was Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Mr. Lewin was yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members.
Do you have a copy of the exhibit? I think Karen's.
I've got one for her. I've got one.
Craig, you're talking about the plan?
Karen needs one for her.
Sure.
For her record.
Sorry, I went a little longer than usual. Yes, that was 5 minutes. But pushing it.
This is going to be the JTG group.
How you doing, Rich? No, Paul Fates is here too. I don't think so. There's no angry mobs here with torches. Which I find disconcerting because I've grown used to it, you know.
Okay, our next application is JTG Group LLC, 1382 Lafayette Street.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, board members. My name is Ron Gelzunas, appearing on behalf of the applicant, JTG Group LLC. Property, of course, is 1382 Lafayette Street. This is an historic contributing structure, which was originally the landing boarding house constructed in the early 1900s, which retains much of its original characteristics, including rooms located on the second and third floors. The building currently contains 2 commercial businesses on the ground floor, a real estate office and an accountant's office, and a number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and office space on the second and third floors. The proposal this evening is to seek preliminary and final site plan approval and variances to renovate and restore the structure, namely to reconstruct the front porch that was removed in the 1950s, to construct an addition over the roofed area, which will be in the same footprint of the existing building, and to convert the rooms on the second and third floor and offices located there into 3 residential units. This project has received HPC conceptual approval in January 29 of 2024. I have to my left Miss Pamela Fine of Fine Architecture, and sitting in the front row is Mr. Paul Cates from Cates Snyder Engineering, and also Joe Gilmartin to his right. If we could have these folks sworn in, please.
Sure, our engineer remains under oath. I think each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Okay, Pam, briefly, you could just place your credentials on the record.
Oh, sure. I have been before this board many times and testified, as well as other boards in Cape May County. I'm a licensed residential architect, been practicing since 2015 on my own, and 10 years prior to that with another firm.
Okay. But-
Yes.
Recognized as an
Thank you.
expert. All right, Pam, why don't you take us through existing conditions on the site, the building, and the design challenges that you faced and what your proposal is?
Sure. So I began working on this project back in 2022. Mr. Joe Gilmartin had me come in, visit the site, walk the building. Basically, what sits here is the first floor is comprised of a bunch of offices, a couple of bathrooms, some storage areas, and various smaller rooms like that. The second and third floors, as I saw them, were offices, but I later learned that they were actually boarding rooms at one point. So there were bedrooms. You'll see there was a kitchen, a couple of bathrooms, and they still exist today. So I have the existing plans on the S1 sheet, along with the existing site plan. The house, I shouldn't say house, the property, the structure is located on the right front corner of the site. And upon visiting it, I was given a couple of photographs of some historical pictures, and I believe these were included in the submission, but you'll see on those photographs.
They're Exhibit B in the application.
Exhibit B of the application, there's an existing front porch that was later either removed or fell apart. I'm not sure, but there is a full-width front porch on the property. You'll see there's 2 photographs. One looks like a much earlier photograph. The second floor was a lot smaller then, and there was no third floor. There was another photograph submitted with the front porch, a full second floor, and then the third floor mansard roof. So we are working basically with that photograph in mind. We presented our concept to the HPC. They gave us preliminary approval with a few minor adjustments to the plans, which are shown here today. And we're looking to go back to HPC for final once we're finished with the zoning approvals. So you'll see, I'll just briefly show you the S2 sheet, which are the current elevations of what exists today. You'll see no front porch. We have a couple of small landings in the front, 2 doors. You'll see the mansard roof in the front there. And then along the back, we have a low slope gable addition. That's only 2 stories. I'm going to jump over to the P1 sheet. And this is showing us the proposed floor plans. So the first floor, we have existing commercial, which will remain as purely commercial. We're going to do some work to improve the spaces, make them more usable, make the office spaces more usable, fix the kitchenettes, the bathrooms and such. We're going to have 2 separate commercial units with a central hallway, a central stair, and then we're adding an elevator in the back. Basically, the entire footprint staying the same for the actual habitable space. And then you'll notice we have that new front covered porch all the way across the front. There's a small portion that's going to be open, and then there's another larger portion that's going to be covered, and that's to mimic what was found in this photograph. And if I jump onto the second floor plan, that's where the residences start. So we have 2 units on the second floor. There's a left unit and there's a right unit. I have the areas broken down in the zoning chart. On the left area, we have 2 bedrooms, we have 2 bathrooms, we have a half bath, and then we have a living dining kitchen. And then also in that left unit, we have an open deck. On the right side, we have another unit. This one is only 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, living dining kitchen, and a powder room. And you'll see there's that central hallway that provides access to both units. And then at the back, we have that elevator. Also at the back, we have a new landing, fire escape. This provides another means of egress for this floor and the one above. And then I'll also mention off the back, right-hand corner for that second unit on the right, we have a balcony space. So they both have outdoor spaces to enjoy. And then if we flip over to P2, you'll see the third floor plan is all 1 unit. So this is the third residential unit on this plan. We have 3 bedrooms on this level. We have 3 bathrooms, a half bath, and a living dining kitchen. And this level has a couple of decks that are private. And then in the back, you'll see, again, the elevator and the landing out the back. Now, I'm going to jump back to the P2 sheet because it has some important square footage numbers written here. One of the variances we were asking for was floor area ratio. But that was because I was including commercial square footage in that number. So if commercial is not required to be counted in floor area ratio, our proposed is actually well under the maximum allowed. So if commercial is not included, that whole first floor level can be removed. So we would be left with an existing number of 2,211, a proposed addition of 1,060, and then for a total of 3,271, which would bring us far under the floor area ratio maximum of 4,090, or 4,900. Sure.
Is it your position that you don't need to comply with floor area ratio, or is it your position that you don't count commercial? I just want to make sure.
I counted it in the original application, but I wasn't sure if commercial space applied to the floor area ratio because it mentions just residential.
I'm not sure. It's a use variance, right?
Well, we have,
What standard, let me finish with that, Rob. It's a use variance, so what standard is the applicable standard when there's a use variance?
So, now, take the use variance out of it. The strict reading of floor area ratio is residential habitable space.
I understand that.
Okay, so, I personally, based on this testimony that she's indicated, and I was just doing the calculation, I don't believe that there's a floor area ratio necessary. Now, the two uses don't go away. So, you know, if you take away, so if it were just those apartments on the site, they would be permitted based on floor area ratio. But the fact, this is the R2 district, it only allows single-family dwellings. The fact that there's apartments and multiple units going in there, that's not permitted use. Because it's mixed with commercial units, that's also not permitted, and we also have the case where there's two uses on, more than one use on the same site. So use variances are still in play, but as far as the amount of habitable space that can be provided on that lot, they're complying. So I don't know how you want to treat that.
Well, that's, Mr. King, if I may, that is my interpretation as well. When I look at the ordinance floor area ratio 525-52, it's truly talks all about residential structures. And even in the commercial zone, C1 and C2, it says all dwellings in those zones have to meet a 0.65 floor area ratio. So it clearly, under that section, does not include the commercial use. However, I do agree that these are non-conforming uses, and this is clearly an expansion of the non-conforming use. So the standard would be whether or not the site can accommodate the impacts from that expansion.
So in my opinion, I'm not sure they need a floor area ratio variance. I'm not going to try to figure that out at the moment. What I will tell you is the fact that they don't meet the floor area ratio if it was a residential building can be an indication that the site, you know, actually it's an indicator maybe it does accommodate it because it's pretty close to the floor area ratio, but it can also mean that it doesn't. I think it's part of the analysis you can do that if it was the permitted use of residential, arguably the building's too big for the lot. But it's pretty close, and it's existing structure. I'm not telling you to dislike it for that reason. I'm just saying that I think the fact that the bulk of the structure, if it were the conforming use of residential, is greater than the floor area ratio, that could weigh against a particular use variance for expanding it. It'd be something to consider. I don't think it's a disqualifier by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's something you can consider in part of your weighing of it. So I'm not going to recommend that you require a floor area ratio variance, but I think that, you know, if it was under, I think that'd be a favorable thing. If it's over, I think it's among the many things you can consider as a part of your analysis of whether the site can accommodate the expansion, okay? So that's where I come down on that. So just factor it in the things you factor in when you decide, okay? Anyway, that's as fair as I can be.
It's a factor to consider, I agree.
Factor to consider. Go for it. Save your variance, right? Come on, help me out.
Okay, and so I'm going to continue on back to P2, just briefly introduce the elevations. You'll see the bulk of the volume of the front of the building remains the same. We are adding this front porch, shutters. You'll see this section here is brand new. So we presented this to the HBC. They requested that we had a trim piece here to delineate that addition on the side, and then this piece up here is actually recessed beyond this deck line. The proposed rear elevation is here, and this is showing you those fire escapes that I mentioned earlier, the small balcony in the back, and then this space here, we had, if you remember, the existing elevations was a low slope gable. So this volume here with the dormers is proposed as new. And then the final sheet, P3, you'll see the sides. So this is the proposed right side. You'll see this is the mansard roof section to stay the same. Front porch addition, and then this area rack here is adding on. Same as down here on the left side elevation. This area here is added on, as well as this portion here, and then this portion here.
Ma'am, can you give me Ms. Fine, can you give me a sentence or two that I can write down in the resolution that explains what portion is expanding? Can you say something like, the third floor, the northeast corner,
Oh, sure.
or something that I could type.
Yeah, so I would,
You know, I need a lot, just want to have some-
we are proposing an addition to the third floor rear portion of the structure
And that addition will be within the same footprint.
within the same footprint as the second floor below. And then there will also be a small second floor addition, which is also above an existing single-story portion of the floor below.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pam, could you just, these plans were in front of the HPC?
A version of these plans, yes.
And they requested some modifications?
Yes, I can run those
Modified
through.
the plans, and we're now looking at the plans with the changes that the HPC requested.
That's
Could
correct.
you just point those out to the board?
I would be happy to. So the HPC requested, I know I mentioned earlier on that front elevation, they wanted this trim board right here, just to delineate where the existing mansard roof section ended and where we were adding on. They also requested that on the sides, the new roof area be stepped down from the existing peak of the mansard. So we pulled that down, and then we also revised the roof lines on the second floor, or the third floor addition, to satisfy what they had requested.
Now, I know the HPC is very concerned about streetscape,
Yes.
scaling, mass of structures and whatnot. Was there any discussion about that, and were they satisfied with your design, your proposal?
They seemed to really like the fact that we were putting back the porch. They had no comments on the porch itself. So I believe that the streetscape satisfied them.
With regard to the front porch, now, is that's triggering a front yard setback?
Yes, yes, we need a front yard setback variance.
Is that porch back reconstructed in the same place that was originally, and we saw in the old photographs from whatever the year that was?
1925 or so, it looks like in that photograph. So there were some areas that are left on the property currently that I walked around and were pointed out to me. Let me see. So in the front here, there's an existing landing. So you can kind of see remains of where the existing porch footings had been located. So we measured approximately how deep those were, and that's what gave us that dimension for that front porch depth.
So it's back in the same place?
Yes, what we believe were signs of where the front porch used to be located, yes.
And in your opinion, does the benefit of having that porch reconstructed and restoring the historical character of this building outweigh the detriment of intruding into the front yard setback?
Absolutely. I think it is a huge curb appeal upgrade. I think it fits with the look of the house. I think it fits on the streetscape. It complements everything that makes Cape May beautiful. So I think this is a great addition to this property.
In fact, the building just to the south and the next one down to the south also have these open front porches, which are within the setback area as well.
Yes, I'm not sure how far into the setbacks those are, but yes, that's why I say the streetscape, it'll
Visually,
complement.
they're pretty similar.
Visually very similar, yes.
Thank you. I would just ask the board to hold your questions for Ms. Fine. We're going to hear from Mr. Gilmartin and then Mr. Cates, and then we'll open it up for questions. Joe, you want to come up?
Evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joe Gilmartin. I'm from Cape May here. I grew up on Cape May Avenue. I've been at this location where the office is now for 37 years. So In my tenure, it's been many things over the years. If we do a very brief history of the property, it was built in 1875. It was originally a plumbing supply and a boarding house. That continued on until probably 1950s, early 50s. There was a phone switching company in there at some point with living quarters on the second floor. There was a pewter factory on the premises for probably the late 60s to mid 70s. In 1980, Barbara Kopp took the building over, and it was Century 21 Kopp and Company. I started my tenure there in 1985. During that time, it was Century 21, it was Cape May Realty, and it was CMI, which is 3 different real estate companies all in one building, which is kind of interesting to go into every day. Simultaneously, there was NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They were on the second floor, and they were there for about 30 years. That was a government office, and then the government changed the standards for the type of building that they could be in, and we lost a great tenant there. So let's see. 1998, I took over the building as JTG Group, maintained the Century 21. We did take over NOAA. They were there for a few years. We've had an accountant in there, a conductor, Zimman from Cape May Point was in there for a number of years. Let's see.
Were they
Apartment.
on the first floor or second floor, Joe?
Noah was on the second floor. Zinman was on the second floor. Let's see, who else was on the second floor? There was a electronics distributor on the second floor at one point, and a company called Track Warnings, who made vests that workers wear on railroad tracks that light up and vibrate when a train's coming. That was pretty interesting. What else do we have here?
So there's been just a myriad of different uses on the ground floor and the second floor
Yeah,
through the years, some commercial uses on the second floor as well.
yes.
And what about some residential uses? Tell us a little bit about how it was used.
It was used primarily as like a boarding house. There was rooms, you shared a bath, and then there was usually meals on the first floor. And over the years, we've used it as that. We've also sectioned off parts of it where there's a kitchen up there, and it's been just one unit, or it's been rooms in a unit. It's been a multitude of uses with residential up there.
Okay, now, current use of the property. No one's upstairs currently?
No.
The offices are vacant and
Yeah.
residential aspects of it are vacant?
Yeah, yes. Right now, it's our office and an accounting office.
And that's downstairs?
Yes.
And your idea is to eliminate all of the various things that have been upstairs and convert that completely to a residential use?
Correct, yeah. Over the years, through the real estate business and having other businesses there, we've never had any problem with any parking or anything like that. But times change. Most people can work remotely. They don't really need the office space anymore. So we're kind of streamlining the building to get it to where we would like to have it.
So currently, you have a real estate office and an accountant office. What you'd say on any given day during the week, and are you open on weekends? Is the accountant there on weekends? How many cars are utilizing the parking lot
Well-
between your real estate office and the accountant? No,
I'd
I don't want to talk about taxis. Just this time, you know.
Yeah. I don't think there's more than 4 or 5 cars at a given time in the parking lot.
And your real estate office, you have real estate agents.
Yeah.
How do they work? Do they come into the office and punch a time card?
No.
Or
They're-
how does that work?
They're all 1099. They're self-employed, so they can work from home, they can work from their car, they can work from Florida, they can do pretty much what they want. Again, primarily, they're picking up a key at the office if they need to, if we don't have an electronic box on on the property.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Joe. Just stay up here
Yeah.
for us, and
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
I know we're supposed to wait. Are you asking for a use variance for specific use, like a real estate agency and a, what's the, or
no,
it's just?
I'll ask him some questions. So you're not
Okay.
changing, or you're not have any plans to change the current commercial use of the property?
Oh, no, no,
That is currently your real estate office, Entry
Correct.
21, and the accountant.
yeah.
And that's continued on for the number of years you've just testified to?
Oh, yeah, yes.
No desire or plan to change?
No, we don't want to go back to making pewter figures. We don't want to do it. It's just the accounting office and the real estate office.
You're asking, but you're going to eliminate any future use of the second, third floor as a commercial use?
Oh, no, yeah, we don't.
And you're here today just to ask for the expansion of the residential component of the building, which, as Ms. Pam Fine pointed out, is an addition over the third floor roof and second floor roof.
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
My goal is to give you, if you win, I'll make sure you get what you want.
Okay,
So I want to be very clear about what you want. If I type real estate agent and accounting office, and then that's what the resolution says, and then you want to put a lawyer in there, that's, okay?
yeah,
So I want to write down what you want. So if you're saying professional office,
correct,
and that's what the board approves, then it'll be professional office.
Right.
Not an ice cream parlor.
Correct.
Okay?
Right.
So I want to put in there the use variance, so to speak, that you want. So I think what you want, you check with your attorney, is
Yeah.
a professional office.
Correct,
Not a retail, just, so I think that's the broadest thing that
correct,
you have any reasonable chance of getting to.
correct,
Professional office.
Correct.
Yeah, now, Mr. King, that is on point. I did have that conversation with Joe and explained to him that the professional office, in fact, he asked me that question directly. Well, I said, well, no, you're not, if, you wanted to change of use to something like a retail restaurant or something like that, you would have to come before the zoning board and get that permission. But something similar to what you're doing, a professional office, that is within that current use of the property, in my opinion, and wouldn't trigger any additional requirements. So, and I think that would all fall under the category of professional office. Let's say if that was the permitted use, you'd have professional office space.
I think professional office is a reasonable thing to have in the resolution. I'm not saying it should be granted, I'm just saying that's.
And that's what we want, Mr.
Residences above professional, because they're often put together in zoning ordinances. A lot of times there's, professional offices are permitted in a residential zone as, where a living space behind a residence, that happens a lot, a professional office and living space behind it's kind of a common thing, so I just want to.
And we want it to be professional office space, because that, and you'll hear from Mr. Cates, that's going to tie into our parking analysis and the low-intensity use that these type of professional offices get. So, Mr. Cates, briefly, your credentials, please.
So I've been working in municipal engineering for 20 years now. I was licensed as a professional engineer in 2011, as a professional planner in 2019. I currently represent 4 boards in South Jersey and have testified before many others as a professional. But this is my first time in Cape May, other than a stint working for Cape May between 2009 and 2011 as their engineer, or working for the firm that was their engineer.
Can you save me some digging and just spell your name? Is it a C or?
Cates, K-A-T-E-S.
Madam Chair, will you
Well-
recognize?
Welcome, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Paul, why don't you just make your presentation, take us through the proposal?
Yeah, so I'm sure as many of you, or all of you know, 1382 Lafayette is located on the east side of Lafayette, right near the entrance to town. It's a 99-foot wide by 99-foot deep lot located in the R2 residential zoning district. As was previously testified, the building has been used for a variety of commercial and residential uses. Over the many years it's been standing. As also was stated, the building currently houses a realtor and an accountant. And there's an existing residential unit on the second floor that's not being used. What we are proposing is a substantial renovation that would bring many aesthetic and safety improvements to the structure. We'll be improving the parking lot and surrounding landscaping. The residential footprint of the building will remain unchanged. However, we will be expanding the staircases, the porch, to bring it closer to its historic form and updating accesses to those units upstairs. The parking lot will be better delineated with parking blocks and surrounding landscape, which will make it safer as well. With regard to the bulk standards, we are seeking a use variance for the expansion of the current non-conforming dual use, and we're maintaining the first floor commercial while expanding the second floor and third floor residential units. The front yard setback is currently non-conforming. We're proposing to further encroach into that setback by putting into place a covered porch and steps. The porch will sit 10.3 feet from the front line, where 25 feet is required, and the steps will be 6.7 feet from that line. We did survey those other structures that Pam had referenced, and they are relatively consistent. The setback on the one furthest to the south is 11.2 feet to the porch, and 9 feet to the steps. The one north of that
Do you want to put that up, and can we mark that as
Exhibit A, aerial.
A1? And take us through and point to those buildings, if you want to go through that just real quickly again.
Yeah, so this one, the furthest to the south, the side of the building is located at 11.2 feet, and there is a small staircase for access to that area, and that is sitting at 9 feet from the property line. Adjacent to that, with the large front porch, that one is at 8.9 feet to the stairs and 9.7 to the porch. So that one's a hair closer than ours. And then the one directly adjacent to us is slightly further back at 11.2 feet to the stairs and 13 feet to the porch. And then next to this one actually sits a little bit deeper, which is 24 feet to the porch and 31. So that conforms to the existing setback.
So we didn't have quite enough there to eliminate the variance with the ordinance for the average front yard setback.
Yeah,
I think if I hear what you're saying is it came pretty close.
Yeah, there wasn't enough structures to justify that allowance. However, given the average, it does pull us consistent with the adjacent homes. So then, beyond that, we are also seeking, there is existing non-conforming lot coverage and parking. The lot coverage is currently at 55.2% impervious. We were originally proposing to lower that to 52.8, but we are actually seeking an additional 266 square feet to accommodate one of Mr. Hurlis's comments, which is a concrete handicap parking area. So that increases the square footage by 266 square feet to 53.6%. And then with the parking, so the proposed, so with the parking, we looked at the historic parking uses on the lot, and given the current intensity and with additional commercial units on the second and third floors, we want to use that other.
Yeah. Mark that as A2, Mr. King. And what is that, Paul? Just briefly describe what the exhibit shows.
So this is
Parking analysis.
this is the current, A1 was the aerial.
A1 was the front yard setback.
Oh, okay, I'm
Area.
sorry, thank you, yes.
A2 is the historic parking
So
calculation.
this is the current floor plan of the existing structure. And as Joe had testified previously, Noah was in the second floor area in the gray. The red was previously utilized as the boarding rooms and the residential unit. And he also, I don't know that he testified it to here, but in our discussions, he had at one point simultaneously been renting the third floor, which I believe was to the composer. So we looked at the square footages of all that commercial space within the building, and that with the 200 one space per 200 square foot and a minimum of one employee per unit, that actually brought the total required spaces up to 21 spaces. The residential units actually require less parking than if the structure remained commercial as a whole. So the one-bedroom unit requires one space, the two-bedroom unit requires 1.5 spaces, and the three-bedroom unit requires 2 spaces, along with the commercial on the first floor, and 2 employees, one per use. That brings our required parking to 16 spaces. However, given the way that the property is planned to be used, we are proposing 12 spaces, which is what we feel the site will accommodate along with those uses. Go back. So those 12 spaces are in the current location of the parking, which is, there is a curb line that runs down the property line, and that's where they currently park. We are proposing parking blocks to further delineate those parking spaces, and we are also pulling the stone back away from the rear property line to create a 5-foot buffer from the adjacent lot. We are looking at modifying the 2 parking spots on the back right to accommodate the handicap parking area, as outlined in the engineer's report. So we are proposing 12 spaces where 16 would be required.
But isn't the point really that what use could you put in here that you would comply with parking? You're not expanding the building, so
Right.
what, I'm not trying to make your case for you, I'm just saying, what use could they put?
It's been historically underparked.
Right, I mean,
You know, and I'm glad you provided that testimony. And I agree with the applicant that the conversion of commercial space to residential space lessens the parking demand, just based on the calculations the code calculations and the residential site improvement standards.
That, and we tried to point out, too, that it's the commercial space, that not the residential, that's driving up the parking count. And hopefully with Mr. Gilmartin's testimony, the board understands how the property actually functions and what the actual parking demand is for the type of offices that are located in there. When you have just a commercial parking standard in the ordinance, it covers all of the type of commercial, most of the type of commercial businesses that could be in a commercial zone. So, you know, that's trying to point out there's a low parking demand, and it's driven by the commercial use, and it's not being caused by the expansion of the residential. That can easily be accommodated on the property.
And if the board accepts that, that's why it's important that Mr. King essentially fine-tune that use general office to professional office, so that if there's any change, that parking evaluation needs to be done, and you guys have to come back to the board for any future changes.
Yes. So, in addition to those variances, we're also seeking 2 design waivers. One, we'd like to leave the parking where it is. It's been functioning there for as far back as we could see in historic aerials, which is right up against the property line. So we are looking for a design waiver from the 5-foot buffer requirement. We did look at the possibility of conforming to that buffer requirement. The drive aisle is actually wider than it is required to be. It's currently at 26.3 feet, where 24 foot would be required. So in essence, we could pull that parking away slightly and get some buffering. But at this time, we're requesting a waiver from that 5-foot. We're also seeking a design waiver for the requirement to pave the parking lot. We think there's a benefit in leaving this as a stone lot in reducing impervious coverage and runoff. The stone will absorb some of the stormwater, and also it slows the rate of runoff into the street in this area. Typically, you see higher impervious coverage allowances in commercial zones, being this is presently a non-conforming commercial use in a residential zone, those standards are lower. But like we said, we are pulling that parking lot in. We're pulling back some of the existing impervious in order to bring that impervious coverage down. Beyond that, we are willing to comply with all other comments made in the engineer's review memorandum.
And you did meet the 5-foot buffer requirement in the rear,
Yes, we did pull the parking back, and we are meeting the 5-foot in the rear.
and that'll.
Will you be able to do that when you provide the ADA compliant parking space?
It's going to be tighter.
Okay, so I think to address that ADA parking space, you should ask for that 5-foot wide buffer.
In that area as well?
In that area. I've requested from the applicant in my review memo to provide one ADA compliant space. Based on the number of parking spaces, that's the requirement. We're essentially updating a site plan that was approved or not approved, it probably predated zoning, so it was just done before any of these zoning standards were in. But we have an opportunity here to get it to comply as best we can. So it's a place of business, there needs to be an ADA parking space, and that's really the only place that it can fit, and that's going to not allow them to pull that parking and create that 5-foot buffer. So that was my request, and they're accommodating that, but it's going to necessitate that buffer requirement.
Well, Mr. Cates has a sketch drawn up for the ADA parking space, which is essentially in the same place as the two parking spaces that are shown, the two together in the middle. And then he has an additional space. That is one space, and then the additional space is in the 5-foot buffer Mr. Hurlis is talking about. So I know you.
So the provision of the ADA space won't reduce the number of parking spaces that, so
No.
you're still going to have 12?
But it will reduce the
Okay.
buffer in that area.
In that area.
Right, so
I
we're
just
only
wanted to make
talking
it
about
clear.
buffering, we're not adjusting the parking number.
Right.
Thank you. That-
And I just wanted to make it clear that we're not talking about eliminating the entire 5-foot buffer along the rear of the property, but only in that area where the car is parked.
Right. Do you want to get it approved?
Yeah, no, I mean, to go back to the stone, I think you mentioned that that counts as coverage, correct?
We weren't counting, we're counting it as semi-pervious in this situation.
Okay. And it actually does, in fact, water percolates through
Right.
that.
You're allowed to take credit for it because it is in a residential zone.
Right. But having to pave it would dramatically increase the runoff from the site
And your lot coverage
and our
calculation.
lot coverage calculation.
And
Craig, there's sufficient room for that apron that you like to have for the?
Yeah, so they already have an existing drive aisle that's paved with pavers, which acts as a tracking pad, so they're not spilling those stones out onto the street. So typically when we have this many parking spaces, I'm a little hesitant to say, not pave it, but in this case, I think we're safe to allow that.
And given that area, we are actually showing a small reduction in that entrance drive to increase the semi-permeable area, which was part of what allowed us to bring down our coverage from the 55.2 down to 53.6. Okay. And so we were looking at these as D2 and C2 variances. We believe by updating the structure, it'll promote a desirable visual environment. It'll actually bring it back into conformance with the historic nature of the structure. We are also providing sufficient space in appropriate locations. We believe that by lessening the intensity of the use on that lot, it's bringing it closer to conforming with the neighborhood, and also reducing the impact to the surrounding neighborhood. We believe the plan does provide adequate light, air, and open space. We are promoting the establishment of appropriate population densities as it fits within the FAR calculation for the residential. And updating the structure is going to increase the safety and general welfare of the public as well as in the parking lot. With regard to the negative criteria, I mean, we think this plan improves on the current use of the site. And we could see no negative detriment to the zoning plan.
One thing I wanted to talk about, I think, is the neighborhood. Joe, you've been there a long while, and Paul, if you want to chime in on this, I know the zone but what are the buildings, are there any multifamily buildings in the zone close to you or in that area?
There's 10 homes in the block. 5 are multifamily currently. 1 is a residential that was previous a duplex, and then the remaining 4 are residential.
And Paul, do you feel that it's a wash, removing the amount of commercial, guaranteeing the commercial doesn't come back, changing that to residential, and that little bit expansion for the residential is better than having the commercial?
Yeah, I think it's creating a less intense use on the site, and the site will better support that use.
And in different terms, can the site accommodate the expansion? With that in mind, can it accommodate the expansion on the site, the expansion of the residential?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone have any questions for anyone who's testified?
I do. Question about I guess probably Ms. Fine would probably be the person to address the question, because I'm going to be referring specifically to the plans. So I'm trying to, in looking at this, they're designated as 2 commercial spaces. I'm trying to, how is this distinguishable as commercial space from habitable space? And then the reason I ask that is this. Looking at the left commercial unit, there's 3 rooms that are designated as offices. There's 2 bathrooms in the space. And if I'm looking at the plan correctly, it looks like there's showers in both of the in that unit as well.
Yes.
Also, there's a laundry closet in that unit, and in the kitchenette, it's equipped with, looks like a sink, dishwasher, and a refrigerator. And then you look over on the right unit, and there's 2 separate dedicated areas that are referred to as office space. But there's also a bathroom, looks like there's a tub in the bathroom. And in the kitchenette, there's a refrigerator, a sink, a dishwasher, and I believe that's a washer and a dryer, with another powder room off of that room as well. So when I look at this, I'm just wondering, other than just putting chairs and tables in the rooms,
Right.
what makes this commercial space, other than I understand how it's presently being used, accept that testimony, but from the idea of looking at this building for what it is and what this proposal is for, why are we not considering this as habitable space?
I understand. For one, we don't have a cooking facility in the kitchen. We're not proposing any stoves or microwaves or anything like that. No ovens. Second, this was by request by my client, who he said the accountant sometimes stays overnight during tax season, so it's out of convenience for him to have a shower and all those niceties at his leisure if he's needing to stay longer than a normal day. But I think we had discussed it. If that is a problem with the showers, with a tub or anything of that nature, they would be open to removing it if needed. But that, we're not proposing any cooking facility. So, as far as trying to prepare meals, it's not going to happen there.
Sorry, if Mr. Gilmartin can add to that.
I'm sorry, you're Steve. Happy to remove the tub, but the reason for a shower there is, Pam is correct. The accountant, tax season, 2 a.m. leaves, 4 a.m. back, goes for a walk, sometimes a run, wants to hose off and get back at it. Myself, I like to fish, I like to surf a lot. I come into the office and do a quick change and go out on appointments. So, if there's a facility there for me to hose off, shower off, and go right back out the door, that's what I do. We're happy to remove tubs and stuff. We'd like to keep the showers just for those occasions where, someone needs that. But, we live at the beach. We like to enjoy the beach. We only get a little time to do it, so we have to work too. So we try to make it convenient, so we can get in, get out, go on. Hope that helps.
I have another question, I guess, as it relates to the parking. I understand the historic uses as a real estate office and as an accounting office. As far as the present use, as far as the number of commercial offices that are there presently, you're proposing 5 different workspaces. And again, I accept that realtors come and go, they're not there all day long. Yet, I think we need to look into the future. It may not be a real estate office. You're talking about professional office, which is a broad area of uses. There's a number of different professional offices that could be used. And we dealt with the pandemic where people are working from, more people work remotely. That may not always be the case. And my concern is with the number of offices you have and the parking. Can you remind me how many spaces you're dedicating for each of these? And you don't need to necessarily answer this, sir, but someone from your group, as far as the number of spots that you're dedicating for the commercial spaces.
How about if I touch on it and then let the professionals jump in?
Of course.
Currently, the way that the parking lot is laid out, we can park 19 cars there easily. No one has to back into anybody. No one has to, K-turn. To meet the new requirements, we've reduced that number. But currently, right now, in its configurations, L-shaped, we park cars in the back on an angle and then down the side. So the space is there. How it gets utilized for the next person that wants to change the use or something, I would think they'd be back in front of this board to make that happen. That makes sense.
On Saturdays, when you do changeover for rentals, how many people are in and out picking up keys? That's my concern.
Key turnover on Saturdays, the pandemic has changed that completely. Check-in was at 2 o'clock. Now they're staggered times. So it's 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. The days used to be Saturday to Saturday. That was it. Saturday was changeover. Now it's Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So it's limited the impact of people. And then
It's limited that impact at once, but it's still the same amount of people coming in and out of there.
Sure, and then over the years, we have never had any problems with traffic coming in or going out in that area. We've never had like a fender bender in our parking lot or going out of our parking lot. Half a block going out of town where people come in and people are going past the Marlin Tuna Club, there's been, I've seen incidents there over the years.
When was the last time it was used as rental, or people staying?
Let's see, this is 24, so summer of 23, summer of 22.
You're hoping to use it as summer rentals or as local rentals for people year-round?
Over the, for the new use?
Yes.
Would probably be seasonal rentals.
Seasonal.
Yeah.
I think that would increase the usage. People don't come in, especially where your business is. Anybody that's going to be staying there as a summer rental, as a week rental, they're going to be driving to the beach, they're going to be driving to restaurants, they're going to be driving to the food store. It's not just like someone comes home, parks a car at night and goes out. There's rentals all around my house, and it's unbelievable how much people travel in their cars. Like, we're 2 blocks from the beach, but the people are still in their car driving all the time.
We try and promote to most of our tenants to park their car and leave their car. And the way we do that is we make sure that most owners have like a Steggers Beach box, so now they don't have to cart things. That they can either get a golf cart or bicycles is what we prefer. So again, they don't have to move the car once they're here. We give every home like an instruction book that says, hey, while you're here, you know, ShopRite delivers groceries, Acme does, here's, you know, the food guys will deliver right to you, so you don't have to leave. Because we understand that. When we see how the traffic has increased, me personally, because I've been here my entire life, I like to say I have more miles on my Schwinn than I do on my Toyota. So I understand how that works. In addition to what we will do with that space is that we've been fortunate enough over the years to be able to extend to people that aren't as fortunate to come down. And that third floor unit, we will probably donate a lot of weeks there to folks that just would never be here. It's very, very satisfying when you can work through a couple church groups and things like that, you know.
On the front setback, where the porch is going to be, you have an intense amount of concrete there. You have the wall, you have the sidewalk, and now you have the additional curb out that they've just put in. So you have so much concrete in front of the building.
I know.
You're going to bring that porch out almost to that concrete.
You would think that, but if you look at the one historical picture, there still is, I'm going to say, 3.5 to 4 feet
But
between the concrete
You
wall.
have no grass between the sidewalk and the curb, where everybody else down the street has that, I don't know what you call it, I'm sure there's a specific name, but
Yeah.
the grass median there that goes between
Sure.
the sidewalk.
Sure.
Unfortunately, there's none right in front of your building, and there's, now that you have curbing being put in by the city,
Yeah.
it's like this.
I'd gladly put it in there, except our property line ends at the wall, so we don't own between the wall and the street. But, man, I'd love to see that, like that little strip of grass that
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about.
We are also modifying the sidewalk, reducing the width and adding some landscaping around it. And per one of Mr. Hurlis's comments, that he would like to see additional landscaping in front of the property, which we do plan to comply with.
Yeah, I made a recommendation. I looked at this, this is like at the gateway of the city.
Right.
This is one of the first properties that a visitor comes in and sees. So I was very concerned about the landscaping. And like I said, this site plan that exists now predated all of our buffer requirements and landscaping requirement. So I recommended that they landscape, particularly along that front there. Now, although that, you know, what's on their property, they also have to get county approval because this is a county street.
Right.
We can ask them to modify the plan, and hopefully the county approves that landscaping strip, street trees, whatever we can ask for. We can have them do that and see if they're successful with getting that county approval. They control that right away, but we can certainly make that request and condition our approval on it.
It's a concern for me, that porch being so close to the street. I mean, in the drawings, in the one drawing, you come down off the stairs and make a right onto the walkway. The stairs actually intrude into your walkway a little bit, maybe about a foot and a half.
Well, and that was due to trying to
It's so
maintain
tight.
more
It's just so-
landscaping.
It's so
Yeah.
tight, and the porch is going to be so big off the front of the house.
But yeah, I think we would be
Can, but it's
more than open to adding a grass strip and street trees as requested by the board.
Should I-
So that strip that we've been talking around, I believe that's called a parking strip, and that's in the public right of way, and that's utilized for if a car's parking on the street, you can open your door and egress from your car and step onto the sidewalk. and-
There's no parking there, though.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
that's what it's for. So, you know, a lot of municipalities have ordinances where you're not allowed to concrete that, and it has to remain something, I think Stone Harbor is a good example, Wild Crest passed an ordinance similar to that, where it has to be something pervious, either grass, pervious pavers, or stone. So I don't know if the city would allow somebody to come in or and cut that sidewalk and then install grass, but
It's not the city, it's the county, so
it would be the county.
I think we could set a condition that says that you have to approach the county with a design plan that shows that, and if you can't get approved, then you, however the board wants to deal with it, but provide evidence that they made that attempt, and if it's accepted, then we're fine with it. If not, then we could grant approval pending their approval of it.
Oh, it's an easy matter to submit the plan.
Right.
I'd show you the plan that we filed with the county. We haven't filed with the county yet.
But I think it's important to landscape the front of this.
Can you tell me what the condition is?
So I think there's a request from the board, and interrupt me if I'm getting this wrong, to create the grass curb strip along the property frontage with the exception of the driveway apron, to provide street trees,
Okay,
within that county right-of-way, and seek approval from the county for those improvements.
but if they don't get approval, it's okay. They have
And
to
it's,
try.
if they don't get approval, then it's, they don't have to come, I'm not going to try and make them come back here if they don't get approval, but they should at least make that attempt, provide evidence that they've done so. And I think it's reasonable, and I don't see why the county wouldn't do it. So I think could be successful.
Another question I have, there was a discussion in the opening about the floor area ratio. Are we in that or over it?
I believe the strict reading of the floor area ratio definition and habitable space excludes that commercial space from it. So whenever we've had mixed uses on any other application, we exclude that commercial space. Now, that doesn't exclude that consideration from you
Right.
judging making your determination of whether a use variance is appropriate for the more than one use, and then the changes that they're proposing, and whether the site can accommodate those uses.
But the floor area ratio would not require a separate variance.
I don't believe the floor area ratio variance is required. They still need a use variance, though.
Right.
They need an even harder variance to get.
Right, yeah, I'm just checking, I may mess up a list here, I'm just checking stuff off.
Can I ask how many of the parking, out of the 12 parking spaces are allotted for the 3 apartments? Knowing that people that come to Cape May come with multiple cars when they rent an area. I mean, you have 12 parking spaces, and you're going to have 3 apartments that you're going to be renting?
Field that one.
How many of the 12 are allotted for them?
I think what we want to do is designate parking spaces for the residential units.
Right,
Yeah, I
What can we
think
do with
currently in the plan, we would have 5.
5 for 3 apartments.
And I mean, but I think given the intensity of the commercial use, I don't know that, I think the applicant we could designate as many as 6, and still adequately park the people that come for that, and we're not opposed to designating those, signing those specifically.
Can you put it in a rental agreement that they only come with 1 car rather than 6, like they do in Cape May?
I don't know how legal that'd be, but
Well,
we
you
could put
tell
it
them-
in there.
you Tell them there's no place to park and you only have 2 parking spaces.
We'll give them a bicycle for the week.
There you go.
No, but I mean, I do think it's reasonable, before we go past that, to have designated parking spaces.
Yeah,
It prevents chaos, and so how would those be designated, Craig? Can you just,
So in the past, whenever we've designated for mixed use, we would sign those. You can't stripe this because it's stone parking, so there would have to be a sign in front of each parking space saying this is for residential unit 1, residential unit 2, residential 3.
Yep.
So we would designate 6 spaces, so each unit would have 2 spaces. We'd provide more parking than what's required.
Or maybe, yeah, the 1 extra would be a visitor, residential visitor, could float between them.
all right, so each residence, because I mean, the way it reads here, there's like 1, 1.5, 2, but you're going to say each residential unit will have 2 spaces?
I would say, I would recommend
They're-
one for the single-bedroom unit.
Right.
2 for the 2 and 3-bedroom units, and then 1 residential visitor parking.
Okay.
So that could be a swing spot if somebody has a visitor or an extra car.
Any other questions? Let's have Craig's report.
Certainly. Okay. I'd like to summarize my January 23rd, 2024 report. For this project, it's located in the R2 Low-Medium Density Residential District. The applicant is seeking use variances, as well as other C variances and site plan, both preliminary and final, for the proposed improvements that they've gone on and testified with regards to, and I'm not going to get into that, I'll let the testimony stand. With regards to the completeness review, so the checklist items, there was a waiver requested from providing some of the utility information on there. There's already existing utilities that service the site, so I did support that waiver request. There were requests from the proposed utility lines. Often, the sewer and water department likes separate services for individual units. I'm not sure whether they're going to require that, but we're going to require that they provide evidence of that sewer and water department's approval for whatever services are provided as a condition of approval. And therefore, I did recommend deeming the application complete. We talked about the uses. So this is an R2 district. The only permitted residential uses that are permitted in this district are single-family dwellings. So this it already has an existing non-conforming use there. The guest house over the commercial, guest houses aren't permitted. The two commercial units are not permitted. Now they're proposing 3 apartments over the 2 commercial units. That's non-conforming. So there's a use variance that's necessary. It's a little bit of an expansion of a non-conforming, but they're also providing 1 new apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment unit. That represents a brand-new use variance. They've requested a variance from the building setback line from Lafayette Street. 25 foot is the requirement. There's already an existing nonconformity at 11.6. They proposed a setback of 10.3 feet to the porch and 6.7 feet to the face of the steps. So those are the variances that are necessary, and you heard testimony with regards to that they're essentially putting back his historical front porch that existed, and you can rely on the testimony from the applicant's professionals with regards to that. The lot coverage variance, there's a maximum that's allowable in that district of 40%. The existing is over at 55.2%. Because of my recommendations and the applicant complying with that, they've modified their proposed lot coverage to 53.6% to accommodate that ADA space that I've asked for. The floor area ratio we discussed, I believe that is gone. Parking variance. So this site, I believe, has historically been underparked in accordance with the code. Dating back to, you went through exhaustive history of numerous commercial uses that have existed there with the boarding house. If you were to apply the code requirements to it, I believe it was underparked historically. There's been, the existing parking situation is undelineated stone parking, kind of a mishmash. The applicant is proposing to bring this up to code. They're delineating it with concrete parking bumpers, so now we know where the parking is, and you have compliant 9x18 parking spaces. Unfortunately, there are 16 spaces required and 12 are proposed. So one of the things that I think...
Craig, you said 16, can you just tell me?
Yeah, so I questioned the 1 space per employee for the 2 commercial uses, and they only had one employee. I'm like, how do you have 1 employee for 2 commercial uses? That's kind of impossible. So I think Mr. Cates
The intent was 2
has
per.
indicated another employee.
Yeah,
Is that true?
1 for each use.
Okay,
So that does bring us up to 16.
So I believe it's 16 spaces. It should be noted that the conversion of commercial space to residential lessens the parking demand based on our code standards and requirements. So the board can weigh that with their decision.
You say that again, Craig?
The conversion of commercial space, which is treated at 1 space per 200 square feet, to residential space, based on the number of bedrooms, lessens the parking demand. Is that all you need?
Yeah, the one thing I'm not clear on, Craig, I think it's important for the board to think about, particularly if there's an appeal or something, is I'm not clear on to what extent the expansion, the part that's expanding,
Okay.
all right, impacts parking. I mean, there's already two professional offices on the
Right.
first floor. That's not really changing.
Right.
There's a residence, and now we're expanding it. So just for purposes of the board's analysis,
So
what extent is
the,
you want to ask me?
and please correct me, but I believe the expansion is the third floor, three-bedroom unit.
Right.
And based on the residential site improvement standards, and if you look at the table on page 3 of 7 of my report, three-bedroom units require 2 parking spaces. So there's an addition of 2.
One thing to note is there is currently 3 rooms on that third floor. So absent of separating it as an additional unit, there could potentially be, without expanding the footprint, that additional 3 bedrooms. So
I got the impression the third floor wasn't being utilized right now. Is that correct?
it had at one point,
Yeah, we used it up until the city passed the ordinance that professional offices have to have fire inspections.
Okay.
And then the fire inspector said, you don't have
Yeah.
a fire escape, no one can use that. So we
So
use it.
based on that, I would think that
We-
conversion of that space is new parking.
Well, prior to that, we had a photographer up there that took pictures to put on the internet, and an appraiser was up there
Yeah.
at one point, so.
So,
but they're-
The applicant has testified that there's been no parking issues there. I've been driving by that site for 20 years. I've never seen a parking issue there. I don't know whether anyone else has seen one. You know, we deal with code requirements, and we also deal with what's actually happening on the site. So I've never seen one. So,
All right, I usually do this at the end, but I'm going to, if I can say something now. I think with the board, the way the board, in my opinion, should approach the analysis of this, and how you vote is of course up to you. And this is an expansion of a non-conforming use. We're gonna assume they haven't abandoned any of their uses, and they're expanding a non-conforming use. But they're also changing the uses around. So it's not a classic non-conforming use. I think you really have to do a weighing here. And you have to, they are increasing expanding the structure and requiring 2 new, that would essentially creates 2 new parking space requirement, okay? So in a sense, the site is trying to accommodate this expansion of 2, of a 3-bedroom unit, a third floor residential unit, and that's creating 2 parking spaces. But there's a lot of benefits that are coming with this. They're returning it to the historical aesthetics. Craig told you the parking lot now makes sense, okay? It's going to function better. So even though it requires 2 more parking spaces, it's now going to function like a real parking lot, which it wasn't before. So you need to take all of it's going to be limited to professional offices, whereas it had a pewter factory in it, okay? So you got to take all of those good things about the application and weigh that against the expansion and the need for 2 more parking spaces. And that's why you get the big bucks. You need to do that weighing. If you don't approve it, then it may stay what it is, a hodgepodge parking space, doesn't have a fire escape on, all these things, they're modernizing it. So you need to take all that into consideration and weigh those 2 parking spaces against the other benefits and make a decision. Okay? That's what I think you're going to be doing in your analysis. All right, sorry, Craig, I'm sorry.
okay. Nope, that's good. Okay, so we talked about all of the variances that are in the table. Mr. Cates mentioned that he asked for waivers from the 5-foot parking buffer and paving the parking lot. Those have always been treated as variances, so I believe there's variances that are necessary for those items. And those items are listed in my general review comments, number 5, which is from 52560D. I know Mr. King needs that one. And the 5-foot parking buffer, I'll have to look up because that wasn't in my review memo. So the 5-foot parking buffer is necessary in the area of the 2 parking spaces that are located behind the structure because of them accommodating that ADA compliant space. So those spaces are wider, and that pushes the parking back into that buffer, and that's why that's being asked for. Paving the parking lot, we discussed, mitigates lot coverage, helps with stormwater. There's already a tracking pad there. I don't see any problem with that. So I believe there are, so we eliminated item variance number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 listed, plus those 2 I just mentioned. Is there any questions with regards to the variances?
So then your variance is 1, 3, 4, and 5, and then you added 2.
1, 3, 4, and 5, and I just added 2. Okay? All right, I'll move on to my general comments. Item number 1, we just asked for the lowest floor. I don't know whether this is in a flood zone area or not, but that needs to be added on the plan. Item number 2, we asked them to revise the zoning table to reflect the revised plans and the recommendations that are in our report. Item number 3 is our standard condition that they have to comply with Chapter 525 minimum stormwater management and grading requirements. They have provided a grading and drainage plan, and we did find that acceptable as is. Item number 4, and I talked a little bit about this, but I think it's very important. One of the board members mentioned how kind of hardscape this site feels. There's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of stone, there's retaining walls, there's not a lot of green space. So the recommendation to provide the landscaping along the front, I think that can even be enhanced by on-site landscaping. I was kind of disappointed that they're only providing a couple shrubs on each side of the stairs. I think you could landscape that whole front of that structure and make a big impression on people that are entering the city. Soften your encroachments into the setbacks. So I would ask the applicant to please comply with that recommendation. Is that a yes? Anyone?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Both,
Okay.
Do you want a revised?
Revised landscaping
submitted?
plan that enhances the front landscaping along the front of the site.
Yes. Certainly.
There may be neighbors here that want additional buffering, but we'll listen to those and adjust our recommendations accordingly. Okay, item number 5, we talked about, that's the paved parking surface, and they've requested a variance from that. Item number 6 is my recommendation to provide the ADA compliant parking, which they've agreed to do. Item 7, we just asked the plans, a lot of the plans are getting bounced back from the construction department based on this minimum roof slope, so we would just ask that they all be provided on the plans. Item number 8, I mentioned this, the city sewer and water department, when they have multiple units, often they require separate services, so we will ask for evidence of approval from that. We asked for additional street trees. I asked for 1. I think there can be more provided, and I think at least 2. Okay. 10, those landscaping species should comply with our code. There are backyard habitat for birds, et cetera, butterflies, recommended species, so your landscaping that you're providing should comply with that. 11 is our standard recommendation that the sidewalk adjacent to the site will be replaced to the satisfaction of the engineer. 12 is our standard condition that they have to provide the inspection escrow, and the CO is tied to the acceptance of those improvements. 13, this is a site plan improvement, so they're required to furnish the required performance guarantee and inspection escrow. 14 is compliance with the requirements of the Shade Tree Commission, Environmental Commission, and Fire Department, as well as Public Works Department. We did receive reports from the Fire Department that recommended approval with no comments, and that is dated 2/21/24. The Public Works Department recommended approval with no comments, dated 2/13/24, and the Shade Tree Commission recommended approval, no comments, 2/29/24. All right. Compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. Once again, mentioning Lafayette Street as a county right-of-way, Cape May County planning approval is required, and you've heard there's going to be another condition affixed to that you're required to try and landscape within their right-of-way and provide evidence of that. 17 is provide evidence of final HPC approval. And 18 is comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And then finally, should the board grant approval, they're required to revise the plans to meet the board's conditions of approval and provide the requisite sets for review and approval. That's a summary of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Okay, any questions? I'd like to open it up to anyone within 200 feet. Anyone beyond 200 feet? Closed to the public?
All right, I'm not going to repeat the,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I'm not going to repeat the standard or what I thought should be your analysis. I just did that a second ago. But it is a D variance, so it requires a favorable vote of 5 out of 7. The applicant has presented the project holistically, sought the benefits of all aspects of the plan, so they're going to do a single vote for all of the variances and for the project as a whole. The motion I recommend being made is to vote, motion to approve variances 1, 3, 4, well, the 6 variances that are now required as outlined by the board engineer on page 3 of 7, as supplemented by his comments to the board, subject to the waivers outlined by the board engineer and the conditions outlined in the engineer's report, 1 through 19, plus 2 additional conditions that were added, which are that the applicant has to try to create a grass curb strip along the frontage to provide street trees within that county right-of-way, but if they do not get it, they do not need to return to this board, but must make a good faith attempt. And the condition, the units will have assigned parking spaces with signs. The one-bedroom unit will have 1 space, the 2 and 3-bedroom units will have 2, and there will be 6 for the commercial and 1 undesignated. Okay? So that's the motion that I recommend be made, but how you vote is up to you. Any questions or comments or concerns about the?
Oh, no, not about the summation. no.
Rich, did we have a comment over on your side about eliminating some of the amenities on the first floor?
We're going to remove the tubs?
The tubs are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually wrote that down as a
Okay,
condition.
I'll add that as a condition. Thank you.
Both or one?
Both tubs, the shower,
Shower and the tub. Okay.
the shower will stay.
Showers are staying, no tubs.
Okay, there's one shower on one unit, and the other one has a tub/shower,
Yeah.
is what I looked
It's a
at?
tub and shower.
So, okay,
It'll be gone.
got it.
Getting rid of-
Thank you.
I will say about that, the less intense use in the ordinance is residential. So the concern that those things kind of seem residential is not the, the commercial use is the use that requires a variance, right? Am I wrong about that? So the fact that they have things in there that make it look residential actually is a more favorable under our ordinance, because it actually makes it more consistent with the use that's permitted. So I understand the question, I'm just pointing out that it's not tragic if it became a residential unit. That's kind of what it's supposed to be.
Can I just make a couple, if we're ready to vote, can I make a couple closing comments?
After, now, okay.
Oh, is it too late? No, look, I just
Usually I
wanted to,
do my thing last, and then they vote on the thing I just said, so.
okay, so it's fresh in their mind. I don't want to disturb that, so.
Well, I'm not telling you you can't do your closing argument if you.
No, I just had a couple points. When I look at this building, I drive by it, it just looks like, it looks like an old building. The property looks like an old property. And I think this renovation with the HPC-approved building is going to make it look, especially with the addition of the front porch to put it back to what it was, and the addition of the landscaping is going to make it historic appropriate. And to Mr. Hurlis's point, this is in the front of the city as you come in, and this is what you see. And right now, you see just kind of an old rundown building. It needs love, it needs care, it needs to be brought back to life, and I think this application will do it. And these additions will be in the same footprint, and it's residential, and the commercial is not being touched. So, what's there now is It's just all the pictures in the application. It's just a myriad of rooms and kitchens and all kind of commercial rental space up there and everything. This solidifies this into the future permanently for clean, appropriate residential use up top only, and the commercial downstairs is not expanding. So just wanted to add that. Thank you, Mr. King, Madam Chairman.
Okay, can we have that motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Venuto.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Who motion, please?
Mr. Venuto.
Thank you.
seconded by Mr. Zetzner.
Thank you. Mr. Ledwin? Yes. Mrs. Notch?
Yes, yes.
That was a yes, thank you. Mr. Walsh?
No, I feel that the property just can't handle combined usage.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Excellent questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Would you consider making it year-round rentals? Just because they're so, yeah, no, it has nothing to do with your approval. I'm just making the comment.
We'll have to see how it is once we get the project rolling, because everything is so expensive
Can't find the number I
to
was
do.
looking for.
You know,
Nobody can find anywhere to live.
I get
And it's getting worse and worse.
probably 30 or 40 calls a month, and I tell everyone, you know, they're kind of becoming extinct. Like, you just can't find them.
I know.
And the ones that we handle, they usually turn over. Someone says, oh, my cousin moved in with me and I'm moving out, but they're going to take over. There's not even a turnover.
Like New York City.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to get worse.
I just couldn't. Property needs help for sure. I didn't want to be the one, but I'm like. Been there on Saturday, changing keys over. There's cars in and out. Yeah, it's the busiest place in town. Everybody's going to be driving right now. Minuscule. On Saturdays when they're changing keys, people in and out. But you know. I also had a real concern downstairs. I'm like, this one kitchen's bigger than my kitchen.
Are you still trying to use the
It's like 20 by 14 or something. It's like, my kitchen is that big.
Converted to bedroom space. They have been bedrooms forever.
one packet?
That's what part of it.
I forgot we had another part of it. Getting ready to get up and leave.
Can I hand these
Another
out?
one.
All right.
Good evening.
Hi, Howard. Oh, more papers. More papers.
You can talk to my.
What happened on this deal, Madam Chair?
Thank you.
No, that's what I couldn't. I remember when they. Supplementary, so we weren't held to that before. We should have known that, I think.
Can we re-vote on the?
Just trying to make it legal.
Yeah. What happens if we reject it? Just because feel a lot of papers. Oh, this is your packet? What did I do with mine?
No, you didn't get one.
Oh, what do I need one for? Got extra ones with third.
I know. I was going to patch it in your back, but I wasn't. I stopped.
Maybe that one is mine.
It's like when my partner Steve had rotator cuff twice. Wouldn't shake anybody's hand.
Did you hurt yourself?
Our next application is Fern and Kevin Waters, 1218 New York Avenue.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. For the record, my name's Keith Davis. I'm an attorney at Nemeth Davis and Goldstein, and I'm here on behalf of the Waters. They apologize that they had a scheduling conflict tonight, wanted to be here, but wanted to have the application proceed. If you may recall, Ms. Waters was here before the board last year concerning this very same home, which was constructed in or about 1915 in the Craftsman style. It's one of the triplets. The original builder constructed 3 homes which are very similar in appearance, one for himself and the other 2 for his daughters. We were here before the board last year to construct a deck in the back of the home, and we requested variances for that improvement. Ms. Waters was here, and that relief was granted. As part of that project of adding the deck, there were also interior renovations that were proposed, according to the plans that Mr. Schultz, our architect, prepared and submitted. And those were reviewed in or about that time by Bruce Britton, the city zoning officer. And he, after inspecting the premises, made a determination that the floor area ratio for the home, which has, again, existed since 1915, exceeded the maximum floor area ratio limitations in the R2 zoning district. When we learned about this, we engaged in extensive investigation, which unfortunately led to the stacks of paper that I handed out to all the board members this evening. We filed Open Public Records Act requests. We went through and found all the prior zoning permits and construction permits that were issued for the renovations that the Waterses have undertaken in the renovation of this home since they came into ownership in 2005. And there were 2 events that we isolated, and Mr. Schultz will provide some additional testimony as to this, as to what led to the discrepancy in the floor area ratio calculation. One of which was the provision of windows on the second floor in or about 2005, which, again, enclosed that area, made it livable space for purposes of habitable area as that's defined by the Cape May City zoning ordinance. The zoning officer, the construction official at the time, they issued permits. Nobody ever said it led to a floor area ratio variance. It was relied upon. The improvements were made, and they exist today. There are some renovations that we're proposing interior, but there's no expansion of the footprint or the walls related to that space. The second issue is a series of renovations that occurred in or about 2010. There was another architect involved, Mr. Downs. He submitted plans to show interior renovations to the home. And for whatever reason, he never included the 3rd floor bedrooms as part of the floor area ratio calculation. We don't know why. We don't know if it was inadvertent. We don't know if he had a misunderstanding as to what and how floor area ratio was calculated, but it wasn't shown. But those bedrooms have existed going back to 1915. We have aerial photography to show that the home essentially is the same as what it was in 1915 with some changes. And there's actually a clawfoot tub in the 3rd floor that is historic in nature and we think has existed there for some time. So at Mr. Britton's request, since he indicated that the floor area ratio is non-conforming, we are here before you to clean up this mess of these issues that took place in 2005 and 2010 in order to have the board hopefully confirm tonight through the grant of a new floor area ratio variance, a D variance, that what exists now is legally non-conforming and is entitled to D-use variance relief. Mr. Schultz is going to provide the bulk of the testimony as to what I just summarized, and I also have Rami Nasser here, our planner, who will also put on proofs to say, even if you don't agree with our argument that this is lawfully nonconforming, that the D variance for FAR is warranted and we meet our proofs. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to have Mr. Schultz and Mr. Nasser sworn in.
Yes.
So what did you mean by lawfully non-conforming?
So we're reserving our rights, okay? We've read Mr. Britton's analysis that he doesn't believe the current structure conforms to floor area ratio, and technically he's correct. We believe, though, that with the permits that have been granted, that have been relied upon by the waters through the past almost 20 years, that the floor area ratio that exists today is lawfully non-conforming.
Okay.
But we've made the application.
I don't know if what I'm about to say disagrees with you or not, but I'm going to tell you my thoughts on this, and they're not unfavorable to you. First, if this building had this floor area ratio prior to a floor area ratio ordinance, then it's a pre-existing non-conforming circumstance, whether it's a structure or a use, I'm not quite sure, but it's pre-existing non-conforming, and it doesn't matter. They've expanded it at some point in 2005 and 2010, so technically maybe they should have gotten variances then. But what I tell my board all the time is, we don't do reliance. We don't do estoppel. That's not our board's function. We're not allowed to do that. What we do is we apply the standard to whatever they're asking to approve, and we either grant it or deny it. And I tell my board, we don't punish people for not getting permits. That's not our job. We don't give them a break because they didn't get permits and they built it. That's not our job either. What our job is to decide whether or not this property can reasonably accommodate a floor area ratio in excess of the ordinance. But if this house has existed for 100 years, or it's functioned since 2005, or it's functioned since 2010 without incident, okay? Unless someone comes in and says there's been flooding, or there's been a parking problem, or it is interfering with the light, air, and open space given its size or something. If it's been functioning all that time without incident, then that's really good evidence that the site can accommodate it without a problem. Does everyone understand the distinction I'm making? So I don't want you to grant this because some building inspector messed up 5 or 6 years ago. But I don't want you to punish them because they had an architect who didn't bother to include the third floor in some permit application. We're not going to get any useful testimony on that tonight. The architect's not going to be able to come in and explain why. The owner is not going to come in and explain how that happened. So that's not what you're doing tonight. I want you to look at this and decide if what's here now can be accommodated under the floor area ratio standard. I think they're going to present evidence that says, well, it's been this way for years and nothing bad has happened. That's persuasive evidence as far as I'm concerned, okay? So whatever you think that, you may disagree with that analysis, but that's the analysis, and in my opinion, so don't punish them for whatever happened in the past, but don't give it to them because you think it was the building inspector's mistake. I don't think that's what we do, okay? I don't think the building inspector's testifying tonight either. So we're not going to get that testimony, so.
I don't disagree with your analysis. I think you're giving good guidance to your client. I'm only putting it on the record so that our application for D variance relief is not deemed to be a waiver of rights that we may have outside of this board meeting in a court of law for municipal estoppel. That's all, just protecting my client's rights.
Absolutely. I respect you're doing that, and we don't do estoppel, so you're safe.
You also mentioned parking, and I'm glad you did, because that is an element of this application too. When we came here last year, we explained to the board that there's some uniqueness to the property in that there's a shared driveway between two homes, the two of the triplets, okay? And there's a shared garage that crosses the property line in the back, in the rear yard. And when you granted the deck variance, your attorney at the time wisely said to the board, we're giving you the parking variance too, but you can't rely upon that if you have to come back on an FAR variance later. So we've sought the parking variance again because it's a singular driveway shared by two homes. Ms. Waters' testimony at the time, and it remains today, functionally, it's working well for the two homes, but we did conservatively ask for that variance again. And I'll note, as Mr. Schultz will explain, with the interior renovations that are being undertaken to the home, There are 6 bedrooms currently, and they will be reduced to 5. So there's actually a reduction in intensity of the residential use itself. So those are the 2 variances, the D variance for FAR and the parking variance, because we don't literally meet the ordinance requirements. Did we administer the oaths? I forget.
Well, our board engineer remains under oath. I'll swear in whoever's going to testify. Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Mr. Schultz, I know you've been before this board before. Have you been accepted as an expert in the field of architecture?
I have.
And where are your offices located?
Well, first, I'm a registered architect in New Jersey and as well as other states where we're active. Our main office is in Philadelphia, but we have an office in West Cape May, in my home, where I've been a resident for 26 years.
Any questions about this witness's qualifications?
No, he's accepted.
All right. And you and your firm, thank you. You and your firm presented the plan of development that we submitted as part of this application, correct?
Correct.
I know that you have, and you were involved in the deck application too, right?
Correct.
I know you prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which we weren't able to display on the screen tonight due to some technological issues, but I know you're going to run through that. Just for purposes of the record, I've marked that presentation as A1, and there's another copy of it in what I handed out. But we've also handed out your slides to all board members, correct?
Correct.
All right. Can you walk through that presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. The presentation was done with the help of Fern Waters in terms of providing some background and lineage to what's happened to the house over the last 20 years, just to help everybody understands why we're here with this variance request. So if it's okay, I'd like to kind of just walk through this as slides. I'll just tell you what slide I'm on, and if you could follow me, I'd really appreciate that. So as I was just mentioned, I think the house was built in 1914, not 1915.
Sorry.
It is a craftsman-style house, and it is part of it triplets. The center house is the Waters house. That's the one in that kind of light green color. So next slide. The Waters bought the house from Toby Adamson in the fall of 2004, actually closed in early 2005. Waters has spent every summer at this house since 2005. They apparently, through their jobs, traveled and worked in different places, but they always came back to Cape May for the summers, Thanksgiving, and an occasional New Year's Eve. So they see it as their family home for a long time. Next slide. At the time they purchased the house, they said it was very much a deferred maintenance. They replaced the roof, they repaired the brick footings, and they went to enclose the rear southern-facing second-floor deck, which you should see in these pictures. They were very concerned, really, about their son, Seamus, shown there, that he might fall out or jump over that low railing. So they frankly put windows in those openings. That's all they really did. Next slide.
So that, when that happened, that took an open porch and it made it livable space?
Yeah, it has become livable space. They use it as an office currently.
So there's windows around it and it's not open currently?
It's not open. The windows surround the space, but it is not heated or cooled at this time. Slide 4 should be a collage of various permits, which I think you have records of. As was already said, all work in 2005 was permitted, inspected, and approved.
All right, before we leave that, and we've marked those also as exhibits A8 through A12, and you've just combined those for that presentation purposes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The next slide is number 5. This is a current view of the rear of the house. Is everybody with me so far? So if you look at I'm going to kind of point to this. If you look up in this area, that's the windows we're talking about that were installed where the porch is. You can actually see the porch column still exists and all the porch trim still exists. So it was really a matter of infilling that area with windows.
I'm going to quiz you. I know the answer. I think you do. What's the total square footage of that enclosure? Do you know approximately?
Oh, I do, that's going to come up later.
Okay, well, then we'll
but,
come to it later. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we can move on to the next slide, slide 6. So that's a picture of what's current happening and what has happened for the last 20 years. It's just kind of a pseudo office space for Kevin and Fern to work out of. It's not heated and cooled. Honestly, there's an extension cord for power. And as part of this application, they'd like to improve that and include that in the floor area ratio. Next slide.
Can I ask a question? Is there a separate door to this room?
It's right off the master bedroom. It's just an opening off the master
So it's
bedroom.
heated then?
It's, well,
And if there's no door?
if
just-
it's, yeah, there's airflow, sure. And when we get to the plans, I could show you that a little more better. So the next slide, you're looking at what the house looked like in 2010. This was another porch on the rear of the house. It's approximately a 10 by 10 porch. They, as part of a kitchen renovation, they enclosed that porch to improve the kitchen and make powder room work. And they replaced the shingle siding at that time. So the next slide.
No enclosure there, right? Stayed open. The porch.
The porch was enclosed in 2010.
10, okay.
Fully enclosed, it became part of the kitchen was probably very small, and they expanded the kitchen and enclosed that corner porch.
All right.
It's about 111 square feet. as I
Same thing,
recall.
permits were secured and obtained from the state.
Yeah, the next page, next sheet, you'll see kind of various copies of plans, site plans, the application timeline, which is provided in those purple squares. I don't need to read all that to you.
Right.
But they thought everything was fine because they were granted permits, and as was said before, the architect who was not local, who was from New York, didn't maybe understand the code, didn't include the third floor in his FAR calculation, which was an error that happened, and became a surprise to all of us just last year.
And again, full copies of those permits and plans we've marked
You have,
what I've distributed.
correct. And actually, the next slide is, again, showing some images of those same permits.
All right.
All right, we're getting there. So the next slide is a picture of the back of the house today. It shows what it looks like today. And in that left side, on that left rear area of the elevation, you can see the double windows there. That was where the porch was. And that in 2010 became an expanded kitchen. The stair was part of that project too. So that corner porch became a kitchen area. Next slide. This is a kind of a timeline of the whole sequence of events from when they bought the house, which maybe I'll just quickly review. So they purchased the house in 2005. They replaced the roof and installed new windows in the second floor porch, March of 2005, which we just talked about. They opened the interior wall. They combined some bedrooms on the second floor, so they reduced bedrooms back at that point in time, too. And that was in 2008. They replaced the cedar siding in 2010. They enclosed the rear porch in 2010, which also triggered this variance, this FAR variance question. And then the other two things are really just maintenance. They repaired the front porch deck boards and they replaced HVAC. That's another picture of the house. They've really done a wonderful job of maintaining and updating this house in a very classic way. So the left picture is that claw tub that we mentioned that was evidence that there was a third floor bathroom. And we only present this because Mr. Britton had a question about whether or not the third floor was original to the house. So we want to prove that it was original to the house. And if you look at that aerial view, that's an old photo. You can see the triplets there. So they're one of the early houses in this part of Cape May. We're the center triplet. You can catty-corner see the Lord residence, which you probably, I think you heard last month. So that was also a very early house in this part of Cape May. So this has to do with when we calculated the FAR, we used the section of the code that says if the house is pre-1950,
Hey, before you leave that exhibit,
yeah,
this is, my opinion, is the only exhibit that matters, this picture here. To a reasonable degree of architectural certainty, how long do you believe the third floor has functioned as a living space?
since 1914.
Okay.
It's original to the house.
And what do you base that on? What facts have you drawn from to reach that conclusion?
Well, the fact is, we have some photographic evidence from, I don't know the exact year of this aerial photograph, but it's probably a long time ago, in the 1920s, perhaps. Those houses, consistent with a lot of houses in that part of Cape May, were 2.5-story houses. If I look at the architecture of that house, I can't imagine that it was added at a later time,
Okay.
that it was always,
And the interior picture on the left, based on your understanding of architecture and design, how long has that been utilized as living space?
when the Waters bought the house, that was a picture they took of the third floor.
When was that?
2005 is when they took this picture. I would believe that that's an original tub and an original plumbing fixtures based on when the house was built.
Okay, so your professional opinion is that this house has functioned with a living space on the third floor for somewhere between 21 and 100 years?
Yes. Yeah, I believe it was built this way in 1914.
All right, good.
Thank you. The next page is part of our application, which you would have received before. You can see some pictures showing the existing conditions. The blue block is really the footprint of the house, the darker blue. To the left, you see the garage. That's a shared garage. That's also a structure in darker blue. The light blue is the big wraparound porch, which is lovely. And then at the brown is the deck that was approved last year that takes the place of an existing terrace.
And we've pre-marked this as A4.
And I just want to, I know it's going to be hard to read, and I apologize. If you look at the zoning requirements in the chart, everything is either existing non-conforming or conforming. So we're not expanding the house or the FAR as part of this application. The hope is we're going to be able to renovate the interior of the house, and that you will grant approval that the prior porch additions would be approved. The prior porch enclosures. If you look at the FAR calculation to the right, and I apologize because it's very small, I thought we were going to use the screen. The house prior to 2005 was 2,950. 2,950 square feet is what the house was when they bought it, based on our calculations. Then in 2005, they added 196 square feet when they enclosed the second floor rear porch, which we agree. And that increased the FAR to 50.91. 2010, they enclosed the rear first floor porch for the kitchen, and that brought the FAR to 54.17, which is where we are today.
And what we're asking for in terms of the FAR variance.
We're asking for that as a variance, as our current FAR. The next slides are really the interior plans. The scope of the renovations are really cosmetic. We are making some big improvements to the flow of the house. We're adding some bathrooms, and we're updating the kitchen. But by and large, the character and the bones of the house will be retained. So you'll see, you're looking at the basement on top, the first floor on the bottom of that sheet. There's really nothing going on in the basement. The next page, you'll see the second floor on the top and the third floor on the bottom. And to answer your question, sir, the access from the master bedroom to that enclosed porch is, there's a pair of doors, sliders that would connect that. But that's going to be office just like they've been using it.
What's that plan sheet you're referring to?
Z201.
Thank you.
So there's minimal renovations, mostly cosmetic on the second floor. The third floor rear to the left, we're actually taking 2 bedrooms and making it 1. So that left room is going to be 1 bedroom. So that's where we get the 5 bedrooms, I believe. We're adding some bathrooms too, but I think it's de minimis for what your concerns are. The elevations, we have been before the HPC, we have received final approval. As part of this project, the Waters would like to make some additional changes. They want to change the asphalt roof to a cedar shake roof, which is consistent with what would have been there in 1914. That's, you can see how that's rendered. And there's several windows that are vinyl windows that were there when the Waters bought the house, which they want to replace in wood windows. So you're looking at the front elevation with the porch and the side elevation, the left side elevation, you can see the gambrel roof, and you can see the third floor and how it fits the roof
So
line.
before you leave that, with this plan that you've prepared, we're conserving a historic home, correct?
Correct.
And we're advancing the desirable visual environment purpose of the municipal land use law.
Correct.
Okay.
So you can see on that same page, you can see the profile of the deck at the rear, consistent with the home's architecture. The second page is the second set of elevations. That's the rear elevation on the top. Again, new roof, replacing vinyl windows, the addition of the deck, which was approved, and in character with the history of the house. And the bottom is the right side of the house with wraparound porch. And again, you can see the profile of the deck. My last slide is looking at some FAR comparisons. We did some research just on some neighboring properties to see how we compared FAR-wise. And we did this through Oprah, and we either found documentation on FAR or we found plans where we could calculate FAR. So just if I could, hopefully you'll follow me. So you see the triplets, everybody? So the middle one is the Waters residence. That's 1218 New York Ave. Our lot area is 6,022. For whatever reason, this house has the smallest lot, which is also driving our FAR up. So our FAR again is 54.17% existing. To the left of the house, the neighboring house at 1216, the lot area is bigger at 7,097 square feet. That FAR totals 60.88%. At some point in time, they did a fairly large addition to the rear of the house. The neighbor to the right or to the east, 1220 New York Ave, has a larger lot again, 7,225 square feet. Their FAR is 45.15%. Because they have a larger lot, their FAR is lower. I would like to mention that house, and we have pictures, also enclosed the same porches that the Waters enclosed at some point in time, and they also have a rear deck. And then adjacent to, on Trenton Avenue, our property, 106 Trenton Avenue has a lot area of 6,240 square feet and an FAR per 2009 application of 56.50%. And next to that, there's a very small lot, 2,640 square foot lot with a 98.6 FAR. They don't have a driveway at all. So I think looking at that overall, we are either in the middle or lower than many of our neighbors in terms of FAR.
And you think that's shows that the FAR that we're asking the board to grant a variance for establishes appropriate population density for this neighborhood?
I do.
And then you didn't have the benefit, when you prepared this exhibit, of the Lord's recent application, which the resolution for was adopted by the board tonight. Do you know what the FAR was approved for that?
I believe it's 53.6.
I think you're right.
Am I right?
And that's right, almost across the
It's,
street?
yeah, catty corner from this property.
Okay, so for all those reasons, you believe that the population density for the FAR we're seeking is consistent with the neighborhood?
I do. That's all I have. The next slide is for Mr. Nasser.
Okay. And just for purposes of the record, we marked that FAR plan sheet as Exhibit A6. And then the next sheet that Mr. Nasser is going to provide testimony to is A7, the variance plan. That's all I have for Mr. Schultz. Any questions as to architecture or his analysis?
You said there's a reduction in bedrooms, 6 to 5.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Can you just point that out?
I think it was the third floor, 2 bedrooms are becoming 1.
That's what I thought you said, I just want to make sure it was clear on the record.
Do you want me to review that, or?
No,
Okay,
just third floor is fine.
okay.
Functionally, with the FAR that we're proposing and what we believe has existed throughout at least the Waters' period of ownership, has the home operated in a manner that has been able to accommodate the deviation from the FAR standard?
I believe it has.
And then the same as to the parking variance that we're seeking, has it functioned even though the home and the driveway doesn't literally meet the zoning ordinance requirements?
It has, and I think Mrs. Waters testified that they have a great relationship with their neighbor. There's never been an issue with parking.
Right. And there is a lawful easement that exists, giving each owner the right to use that driveway, and we've submitted that.
Correct.
Any other questions? If not, I'll bring forth Mr. Nasser for a few questions as to planning. Come on up, Ron.
I hate to do this, but can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Your chart says 40% is the maximum floor area ratio, and he
Sure.
says 48.7.
That's the 1950 grandfathering that he explained. There's a provision in the ordinance.
I just want to know if Craig.
Make sure he agrees. Yeah, sure.
The 4899, yeah, that's what I have as existing.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, but they're saying that the required, I thought, was 48.
So the literal requirement is 40. But there's a provision in the ordinance which allows you to assess the FAR as of 1950, I believe it is. And I believe Mr. Britton issued an updated memo, which says as long as we can demonstrate what was in 1950, and I believe your testimony was that it's the 48 number, right?
Yes, we basically recalculated the FAR prior to the porch enclosures occurring.
When I complete my reviews, I utilize the FAR requirements based on the dwelling type in the zone that it is. That's how the chart works. And then at the end of that section, there is a grandfather clause. Now, all the applicants never provide a 1950 justification, so I always just utilize the top part of that. Now, they're certainly able, the ordinance does provide that provision.
So can I change your chart to be the 48?
You may.
Okay, so it'll be .48?
Is it .48 exactly? I think it's 48 and change.
97,
0.49.
4897?
48.97%.
Yeah, 4897. Almost 49.
Well, it's, never mind, I don't want to talk about
round
it.
up.
It's fine. No, it's the house without the porches, but go ahead.
We offered that just to show that the deviation is not really from .40 to .54. It's less of a deviation under the ordinance, because the ordinance allows you to look at FAR as it existed in 1950, and we've calculated that by taking out the additions, the enclosures that Mr. Schultz described. All right, I know Mr. Nasser was here on an earlier application. He was sworn in as an engineer and a planner. He set forth his qualifications on the record. Do you have any questions about his qualifications as a professional planner for this application? Okay, great. So, Mr. Nasser, you've reviewed everything that Mr. Schultz just described and put into the record, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you also prepared, your office prepared a variance plan that we're marking as A7. That's part of the record as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You're familiar with the issue. You
Yes.
recognize that we request an FAR variance here. What's the standard for the board?
Well, if you look at the FAR, it's a D4 variance. So we need to show that the building is suitable to handle the additional increase in the floor area ratio. Basically, that's what we're supposed to do. For the board to be able to make a decision that we need to prove that this structure can handle the additional FAR, because the size of the property is what dictates FAR, and this property is a little bit undersized from the current standards.
So the use is permitted. It's not a D1 variance. It's a relaxed burden of proof for an FAR variance.
Yes, sir.
And that's under a case called Coventry Square, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You heard a couple purposes of zoning, desirable visual environment, conservation of historic resources, Do you believe we've also established an appropriate population density with the testimony Mr. Schultz put onto the record?
Yes, also we established that the structure is suitable for this additional FAR. We're not increasing the edifice of the building, the footprint's staying the same. We're just enclosing a couple areas that they are there. So you're not going to have any visual change to the structure with the increased FAR.
And do you believe the same also applies to the deviation from the parking requirements since there's a shared driveway?
That's a little bit different because the parking is a C1 variance, is a hardship variance. We have 2 parking spaces available. We are required to have, for 6-bedroom, 3 parking spaces. But now we are reducing the number of bedrooms to 5. We are still required to have 3 parking spaces, so we are deficient by 1 space. But keep in mind, when this structure was built, the lot was created, they didn't have those standards. So it becomes a hardship to impose new standards that came in probably like 50 years ago than for a structure that was built over 100 years ago. So I believe the shape of the properties was, the size of the properties was forcing us to request the variance.
And with respect to both the FAR and the parking variance, do you believe that there would be any substantial negative impact to the public good or to the zone plan?
No, sir, because usually the negative would be you're impacting the visual impact on the neighbors. We are not doing that. We're not changing the density. We're reducing the intensity of the structure. So I don't see any negative to the zone plan or the zoning ordinance.
And that's by a reduction in the number of bedrooms?
Yes, sir. I'm not changing the actual house itself. It's a historic home. We're preserving a historic home, and I think that's a plus.
Right, and actually bringing it more into the character of what it was in 1914 when it was built with cedar roof shingles and taking out the vinyl windows and putting in wood.
Yeah, the renovation is actually give it its glory back.
For those reasons, you believe that both variances are warranted and we've met our burden?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have for Mr. Nasser. Any questions from a planning perspective? That concludes our presentation. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Let's go ahead with Craig.
Sure, I'd like to quickly summarize my January 8th, 2024 review memo. This is a project located in the R2 district. You've heard testimony from the applicant, what they're proposing to do. We did recommend deeming this application complete based on the information that was provided. On page 2 of 5, I have a zoning table that indicates the floor area ratio variance is being sought. The underlying zoning district for single-family dwellings requires .40. There's a grandfather clause in there, which is essentially they're grandfathered in at .49, and they're proposing .5417 as a floor area ratio. The other variance that they requested is for parking. I agree with the engineer and planner's testimony. They've reduced the bedrooms from 6 to 5. The parking requirement is still 3. The residential site improvement standards is weird. Fractional spaces get rounded down instead of up. So the required, so the threshold that kicks in for the next would be 7 bedrooms. So at 5, it triggers 3 required parking spaces. 6 is still 3 required parking spaces. At 7, you're required 4 parking spaces. A little odd, weird calculation, but that's how the residential site improvement standards work. On the next page, I highlighted the variances that were granted from resolution 928-2023, semicolon 2. That's what we granted the last time, and the variances that have been requested are for floor area ratio and parking, and you've heard testimony from the applicants in support of that. My general review comments are essentially the applicant shall conform to the conditions set forth in resolution 928-2023, colon 2, unless specifically modified by the board's review of this application. So if you're going to add any conditions, they're added on top of what's already being conditioned on what they're constructing right now. So that's the easiest way of summing it up. I offer no other comments. The Fire Department, Public Works Department, and Shade Tree Commission reports recommended approval. The Shade Tree Commission did have one condition. No trees are involved in this application. Replacement of
Sidewalk?
sunken blocks of concrete sidewalk fronting street Sycamore may be eligible for the 50/60 sidewalk replacement program. One of the conditions from the previous approval was, you're required to replace the sidewalk, satisfactory to the board's approval, the zoning board, engineer's approval, so that we evaluate the sidewalk after construction, so we'll have you replace those sidewalks at that time.
No issue with that?
That's it. Any board questions?
Okay. We'll open it up to anyone within 200 feet of the property for any comments. Please turn your microphone on, state your name and address.
Yes, hi. My name is Jens Fogh. I live at 108 Trenton Avenue.
Oh, sir, I have to put that in the resolution. Can you just spell that for me?
Yes, first name is Jens, spelled Jens. Last name Fogh, spelled Fog.
Okay, sir, and the address again?
108 Trenton Avenue.
Thank you, sir. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do. No, my comments are brief. The Waters are good neighbors. They take good care of their property. My wife and I, my wife Leslie is here with me. We support the application. We think the improvements, although they'll be mostly interior, with the exterior cedar roof will be a big improvement, more in keeping with the neighborhood. So we're excited to see that change, and we're excited for the Waters. So again, we support their application.
Have you seen any problems at the site with the current use of it?
Other than the sidewalk issue that Mr. Hurlis mentioned, no.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else within 200 feet? Anyone beyond 200 feet that wishes to speak? Closed to the public?
Comments, questions? Okay. The board, the reason I thought it was important to establish that that third floor has been present for a very long time is that it's a very different consideration for the board if it's trying to figure out whether the site can accommodate a whole nother third floor and these enclosures, or whether the site can accommodate these enclosures. Based on the testimony, I think the more reasonable analysis, given what's been testified to, is you're really not deciding whether this missed third floor that in 2010 on the plans, whether the site can accommodate that. I mean, the site has existed for 100 years with that third floor, and the testimony is that it was used for residences. So I think it might be troubling to do this analysis and say that you're deciding whether the site can accommodate another 1,000 square feet or whatever this third floor is, some huge number. Really, what you're deciding is this site can accommodate enclosing some existing porches on the, I think, the rear of the property, not bedrooms, not anything like that. So that's really the decision you're making, is whether the site can accommodate the additional living space created by putting windows in and closing in those porches on this 100-year-old property that was built really without the benefit of knowing modern zoning, so the lot sizes and the size of the houses can be a little tricky. So that's the motion is to grant. How you vote is up to you. And by the way, you may decide that it can't accommodate this. You may decide it's too much. There's not enough parking. Adding more space isn't a good thing. That's within your discretion as well, but the record is the record. So the motion would be to grant the variances 1 and 2 on page 3 of the engineer's report, subject to the waivers and conditions described in the engineer's report, and subject to the conditions outlined in the prior resolution 9-28-2023:2 that are already in the record. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so can we have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mrs. Notch, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Ledwin.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you. On behalf of the Walters, thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight.
Don't run off.
Oh, I think I did it for you, kid.
Do you remember that driveway one?
Okay.
Oh, can't go eat yet. We got more work to do.
We can't go yet.
What's that?
More work to do.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is discussion of 2023 zoning board decisions. Does anyone have any comments about them?
Maybe I can ask a general question now on this application. When we heard this back, there was question about the FAR, and it says right here that there was an issue about the portion which may or may not trigger the FAR. Should we have not heard that?
Oh, we did. They were doing an exterior deck.
But should we have not heard that until this one was settled?
No, because the deck doesn't impact the floor area ratio.
Okay.
So it's not even in the floor area ratio calculation.
I'm just thinking, like, if we said no now, what would have happened here?
Nothing, because the deck doesn't reflect floor area ratio.
No, I mean, if we said no to this application now,
Nothing would have happened, because they were building an exterior deck.
but it affected the windows and,
No, but they didn't do any of that.
no, but we just approved them to it.
But they wouldn't have to
We're
deconstruct
legalizing
it.
stuff that already happened.
Right.
The stuff that they're doing now has no impact on floor area ratio.
If they lost this, and if you made them deconstruct if they lost, they would have had to bring their home into compliance with the floor area ratio. Those
I guess that's
decks-
what I'm asking, yeah.
Those decks, whether they were there or not, would not help them. They could remove it, wouldn't change the floor area ratio. They would have had to open up those
Porches,
patios,
okay,
I guess, or do something else to make it comply. Or appeal and then sue you for all the permits that you issued in Reliance. So that was the other option.
You asked a question about heating and air conditioning. And part of this application
Yes.
was regarding heating and air conditioning. And in general, heating and air conditioning of a habitable space is not the determination of habitable space. So it's not part of the definition.
Okay.
So that's not a distinction. It's whether, you know, I had it open. Oh, here it is. An interior finished room enclosed by a floor, ceiling, and permanent weather-resistant walls, which has a minimum floor-to-ceiling height of 6.5 feet, which is intended primarily for human occupancy. They weren't disputing that. You know, it was being used as an office. It was open to the interior. So, but just in general, the heating and cooling of that space is not the determination.
It was still,
So I just wanted to
no, absolutely.
educate, I think it's a good education. Really, it's not part of this definition, so, yeah.
Right, fine.
So,
Yeah, we're just gonna see just
you gotta kind of work into this backwards. There's an exception for decks, patios, except, so when you enclose that and put windows on them, it's now weatherproof. And I think that's what transforms it from not counting to counting. So, just in the future, for all board applications, just remember that. And just the zoning board of adjustment decisions, thank you, Karen, for putting these together.
You're welcome.
When the planning board does master plan and reexaminations, we use these things to make adjustments to the zone plan, you know, the zoning ordinance. So these are very important.
Is there a deadline on this, Karen?
No, not that I'm aware.
This
It's just
prob-
annually, I'm sorry. And it has to be done annually.
I would just say that this is sort of like a master plan kind of discussion, and it might be a better idea to try not to do those on nights when we have 3 applications.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Well,
because this
the-
warrants like it,
These guys don't do that planning. What happens here is this board forwards those to the planning board for those master plan review actions.
but
So
it's really important because.
it's very important.
You want to take time and really analyze these and think about them, because this is your chance to tell and have a discussion about it, because this is your chance to tell the planning board variances that you're encountering repeatedly that you think should be considered for different ordinance legislation. things about pools and distances from houses, and things like that. So, you know, I just think that this, that's what the purpose is. It really is it's really your chance to impact the master plan. I mean, I know it doesn't sound that way, but it really is your chance to tell the planning board what's going on in the variances, and then they can make recommendations up to, based on the things you say.
If there's a pattern of approval or denials on certain things, you can make that recommendation to the planning board. Listen, we're running into a headache here because of something that's in the ordinance, and we keep running into this and it needs to be fixed. So that can be made at any time. Doesn't have to be at the time of master plan or reexaminations, but.
Right.
But it's a very important document. I know we're in a hurry to get out of here tonight, but every year that we do these, I mean, it's very important, so I'm just trying to.
I would table it.
Would you like to table it? It's going to be a while before.
Yes.
Well, it's factual, right? So unless there's an error in it,
I hope
we're not
not,
making
but-
recommendations. I mean, we can review this at a later date to make recommendations.
Be a good idea.
What's that?
But this is just factual, and we're just looking at that. So
Whatever you want to do.
if the board wants to put this on an agenda where it's a little later, we have more time to talk about it, that would be appropriate.
Because a lot of times I have to do a resolution to send this up there, so in the past, that's when I put in the resolution kind of
Okay.
recommendations.
Well, if that's the case, then we should table it and for a full discussion later.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind if you want to do it now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think we should talk about it, and I think we should just table it.
Table?
All right, so we're tabling the decisions, and we also have to approve the bills. So if everybody looks at the bills,
So we made an overall, should I call, do we want a motion to table that?
I think the chairperson can do that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
and then let's make a motion to approve Palestina and Associates and King Barnes bills.
I'll make that.
Okay. Mr. Walsh made a motion
I'll second it. Oh, well, no.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwin.
by Mr. Venuto.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwin. Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and next would be an adjournment, if anyone wants to make that motion.
Mrs. Notch motions, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Wow, that was longer than I thought it was going to be.